Hey guys, tonight we start with something simple. A medieval castle, a little wind, a lot of stone, and one very polite ghost who probably just wants to chat about his unfinished paperwork. You're standing at the base of a fortress that has been pretending not to be haunted since the 14th century. Its portcullis hanging above you like the jaw of a steel monster waiting for the right moment to bite. The air smells of damp moss and extinguished torches, and somewhere in the courtyard beyond a chain creaks even though nothing moves. You probably won't survive this, but don't worry, it's going to be a slow, cozy kind of doom. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Now, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is right now. I love knowing whether it's midnight for you too. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You walk under the archway, where centuries of soot have turned the stone the color of an old candle wick. The first thing you notice is how every sound seems amplified: the soft scuff of your boots, the echo of your own breathing, the way your heart seems to sync perfectly with the slow, groaning hinge of the inner gate. It's not your imagination. Many medieval castles were designed with acoustics that amplified footsteps, partly for defense, partly to make visitors feel small. And it's working. You step into a courtyard bathed in moonlight that feels almost too bright, the kind that reveals just enough to make you wish it didn't. A crow calls somewhere above. The kind of crow that definitely knows more about the afterlife than you do. The air is colder here, as if it's traveled straight from the century when this place last mattered. You catch a faint movement near the well, a flicker, a shimmer, maybe just mist, but mist doesn't usually nod in greeting. The locals call him the porter, a spectral watchman whose job was to guard the gate long after his contract expired. Historical records from the late 1300s mention a real man by that title who vanished during a siege, never found, though his keys were later discovered inside a wall, still warm to the touch, according to a priest who probably regretted touching them. You stand still, because apparently that's what your survival instinct has decided to do, and watch as the shimmer solidifies into the vague outline of armor and patience. The porter doesn't attack or moan or rattle chains. He simply turns toward you as if waiting for the correct password. In the flicker of ghost light, you catch what looks like an old heraldic badge on his chest. A lion devouring a snake, an emblem historians still argue belonged to either the de Clare family or an obscure order of knightly accountants. You whisper a greeting because whispering seems like the right thing to do in a castle that has opinions about echoes. The porter inclines his head, a gesture so formal it could only belong to someone who still believes in shift schedules. Behind him, the gatehouse door creaks open a few inches, though the wood looks centuries beyond movement. Inside, the dark smells of rust, old paper, and the kind of cold that doesn't touch your skin but somehow your thoughts. You step closer, half expecting the hinges to scream, but they only sigh like an old librarian caught napping. The porter watches, and for a strange moment you feel the etiquette of it all. You, the visitor, he, the host, both bound by rules, neither of you entirely remembers. It's a small reminder that medieval castles weren't just battle machines, they were bureaucracies with walls, full of paperwork, passwords, and politics, and apparently that extends to the afterlife too. Somewhere near the inner yard, a flag flutters despite the lack of wind, displaying a faded symbol of crossed keys, the same motif you'll stumble upon much later tonight when you reach another castle's crypt, but that's a spoiler. The porter moves slightly, pointing toward the chapel where moonlight glances off shattered glass. You follow the gesture, curiosity outweighing fear, because curiosity always wins in these stories right before the screaming starts. Inside the chapel, pews lie tilted like half-sunken ships, and a tapestry droops from the wall depicting St. Michael defeating something vaguely reptilian that might also be the castle's plumbing. A faint hum fills the air, not music, not wind, more like the resonance of someone's last thought echoing through stone. You close your eyes and realize the hum matches your pulse again. Because ghosts love good rhythm. The porter fades a little as you step farther in, his outline dissolving into the same dust motes that hang like galaxies in the air. A single candle stub still sits on the altar, melted into the shape of a sleeping dog. That's when you remember a quirky historical tidbit about medieval superstition. Many castle guards believed lighting a candle at midnight without naming it invited a spirit to claim it as its body. Congratulations, you're now trespassing in the most literal sense. You whisper an apology, mostly to the air, and the hum softens almost approvingly. Somewhere, a stone shifts. Maybe the porter clocked out for the night. Maybe the castle's adjusting its foundations just to keep you nervous. The place feels alive in that quietly judgmental way only very old buildings can manage. And as you step back toward the courtyard, the moon dips behind a cloud, and every sound drops away at once. No wind, no crow, not even your own footsteps, as if the castle itself is holding its breath to see what you'll do next. You stand there, listening to silence so dense it almost hums, and for a fleeting second you think you hear the porter's voice, faint but clear. Lock the gate when you leave. The chill that runs through you isn't fear, it's etiquette. Even ghosts deserve good manners. And with that, the gate creaks shut behind you, sealing you into the story that's only just begun. You wake to the sound of dripping water, or maybe it's time dripping. Either way, the castle hasn't decided to let you sleep. You're lying on a bench carved from oak so old it's practically compost, and above you, moonlight slides through a narrow window slit, painting the walls in stripes of silver. Something moves past the light, a shape tall and deliberate, carrying what looks like a lantern. Of course it's heading for the East Tower. Every haunted castle has one. The tower no one visits because the architect ran out of courage halfway through construction. You stand, your joints making sounds that could qualify as medieval percussion, and follow the glow through the hallway where dust motes hang like static. The air here smells different. Older, sharper, as if the stones remember what it's like to be outside. You brush your hand along the wall and realize the texture changes every few feet, alternating between limestone and flint, an ancient renovation project that somehow never finished. You pass a faded fresco of a knight kneeling before an angel who looks deeply unimpressed, then a doorway where someone once scratched the letters in HOC Signo before apparently losing interest. The lantern's glow pulls you onward, up a spiral staircase narrow enough to make your shoulders negotiate with gravity. The steps are worn uneven, the kind of wear that suggests more than human feet, something lighter, recurring, patient. About halfway up you notice it's not oil you're smelling but beeswax, and the flame burns with that slightly green edge that says it's not strictly fire anymore. By the time you reach the final landing, the tower has gone completely silent except for the soft tick of metal against glass. The lantern stands on the floor, suspended in mid-air, swinging gently like it's waiting for you to notice the obvious. There's no hand holding it. You freeze because apparently that's your hobby tonight, and watch as the lantern slowly drifts toward the battlements. Through the arrow-slit window you can see the mist rolling in from the moors, turning the world outside into a dream of its own fog machine. The lantern pauses, tilts slightly, then flares, just once, bright enough to outline the faint silhouette of a man in chainmail leaning on the parapet. The light fades, but the afterimage lingers, burned into your retinas like a saint's autograph. You whisper, "You still on duty?" because humor feels safer than silence, and the figure's head turns just enough to suggest acknowledgement. According to the castle's records, what's left of them, the East Tower was once the watchpost of a guard named Osric, who was so dedicated that even plague couldn't make him leave. When the castle fell to illness in 1349, Osric was said to have sealed himself inside the tower with enough rations for a fortnight, intent on keeping watch until the Lord's return. The Lord never came back, and neither, apparently, did Osric. When workmen broke into the tower a century later, they found only rusted armor, a dried-out lantern, and a single line carved into the wall. I saw them in the fog. Scholars still debate whether he meant ghosts, soldiers, or something far less poetic, but the lantern has appeared every few decades since, always on nights like this, when mist replaces logic. You take a careful step forward, the floorboards sighing like tired monks, and find the lantern has stopped swinging. It's perfectly still now, its flame steady as if it's waiting for you to approach. You do, because curiosity hasn't killed you yet, and probably deserves a fair chance. The moment you're close enough to feel the faint warmth, a voice not quite inside your ear, not quite outside, murmurs something that sounds like "turn away." Naturally, you lean closer. The air around the lantern bends, shimmering with heat or memory, and suddenly you see through it a vision stitched into the air like old film. Soldiers in tattered armor run through fog, shouting to each other across the battlements, their torches struggling against the same sickly mist. One drops a pike, another vanishes mid-scream, and Osric, recognizable by the crooked buckle historians mention in that one surviving payroll ledger, stands alone, holding the lantern high while shapes move below. You can't see the enemy, only the fog twisting itself into something almost human. When the vision collapses, you're left gasping, the lantern gone, the floor solid again. A cold draft brushes your neck, carrying the faint smell of iron and regret. You laugh, because what else do you do when a dead man shows you his highlight reel? Somewhere below, a bell tolls once. Not a church bell, too metallic, too close. You look down the stairwell and realize the sounds coming from within the walls, echoing through the castle's spine. For a moment you wonder if the entire structure is one enormous instrument, centuries of echoes playing themselves back like some medieval mixtape. It's not impossible. There's an actual architectural theory that some stone corridors can resonate low frequencies strong enough to induce mild hallucinations. Congratulations, you're haunted by geology. But as you start down the stairs, the air grows heavier, and you realize the lantern's glow has returned below, flickering faintly through the gap in the steps. It's moving again, slower this time, as if retracing its route. You follow, instinctively keeping your distance, your breath fogging the cold air. When you reach the base, the lantern hovers above the old armory door, where someone's carved a new symbol in the wood. A circle divided by 3 lines, a sigil you vaguely recall seeing on a medieval coin from Saxony, though historians can't agree whether it represented divine protection or the tax office. The lantern's flame tilts toward it, flares once, and the door creaks open an inch, exhaling a breeze that smells like rusted steel and candle smoke. Inside the armory, racks of broken spears lean like exhausted dancers, and cobwebs drape the walls in delicate resignation. A single suit of armor stands upright, its visor down, its gauntlets clasped around a sword that isn't there. You step closer, noticing faint scratches on the breastplate, marks that spell out words in Latin so bad even the ghosts probably corrected them. Nulla pax sine vigilis. No peace without watchmen. You whisper the phrase and the lantern flickers violently, as though it recognizes the password from some long-forgotten duty roster. The armor shifts just once, a small metallic twitch that sounds almost like acknowledgement. Then the light extinguishes completely, plunging everything into black. For a moment you think you hear the clink of a key, the click of a latch, and then the strangest sound of all, quiet laughter. Not cruel, not mocking, just relieved. You back away, reaching for the doorway, feeling your way along the wall until your fingers find the stone edge. The moment you step out, the air lightens as if the castle exhales again, content that someone finally checked in on the night shift. You glance back, half expecting the lantern to appear again, but the doorway is empty now, the mist thinning into ordinary night. Still, somewhere above you catch a final shimmer, one brief glint of green flame tracing the parapet before vanishing into stars. You wonder whether Osric finally saw them in the fog again, whoever they were. You also wonder if your phone camera would have caught it, though given the castle's track record, it probably would have just uploaded another blurry picture of your thumb. Either way, the East Tower stands quiet now, its duty complete, and you step back into the courtyard where the silence feels earned. The porter's gate looms behind you, still shut, but you could swear the lock has shifted position, as though someone relatched it properly after you left. A little ghostly housekeeping never hurt anyone. You pull your cloak tighter, pretending you have one, and glance toward the western wing where a faint sound hums a woman's voice, singing something too soft to be wind. The melody drifts through the air like a lullaby with bad intentions, and just like that, your next destination chooses you. The song leads you through a hallway lined with portraits of people who all look vaguely disappointed in your life choices. The eyes follow you, of course they do, and you realize every frame tilts slightly toward the East Tower, as though the dead themselves want to watch the light you just followed. The music grows clearer, a soft humming that feels like it's coming from inside your chest instead of through the air. You step through a narrow archway into a long corridor called, rather helpfully, the Widow's Walk, though no one alive seems to remember which widow it was built for. The stone beneath your feet is smooth as soap, worn by centuries of pacing, and you can't help noticing that the pattern of footsteps only goes one way, away from the bedroom door at the far end, never back. There's a draft here, sweet and cool, carrying the faint scent of violets and candle wax, the classic perfume of someone who died before inventing deodorant. The humming stops the moment you move, as if the singer's holding her breath to see if you'll keep coming. You do, because you're brave, or because curiosity is your preferred method of self-sabotage. The lady in the silver veil has been haunting this corridor since the reign of Edward II, at least according to a chronicler named Robert of Reading, who clearly had too much free time. He claimed she was the young bride of a nobleman executed for treason, her dowry confiscated, her name erased from the rolls of inheritance, a medieval version of being ghosted, literally. For years, scholars have argued whether she was a real person or just an allegory scribes used to guilt wealthy widows into funding church repairs. What everyone agrees on is that when moonlight hits the west-facing window, she appears, pacing the length of the hallway, clutching a piece of parchment that no one has ever been able to read. You reach the window just as the clouds part, and sure enough she's there, translucent, elegant, and dramatically underdressed for the climate. The veil covering her face shimmers like smoke, and her hand, pale as milk, holds what looks like a folded letter sealed with red wax. The air hums faintly, the same tone you felt earlier, and when she turns her head, the veil ripples though there's no wind. You half expect her to glide straight through you, but instead she stops and studies you, the way an art critic might regard a painting that's hung slightly crooked. Then she lifts the parchment just enough for you to see the crest stamped on the seal, a crown above a crossbow, the emblem of the short-lived House of De Vere, whose lands were seized after a very awkward dinner with the king ended in several beheadings and a spilled gravy boat. That's your historical fact of the evening, by the way. In 1317, the actual Baron de Vere was executed at the Tower of London after an argument over royal hunting rights. There's your scholarly realism wrapped in ghostly romance. You take a step closer, and the lady tilts her head, as if considering whether you deserve the secret she's been carrying for 700 years. Then she presses the letter against the window glass, and for a moment you can see faint words illuminated in moonlight, "Forgive me." The wax seal melts, dripping downward even though there's no heat. When you blink, the letter is gone, but a faint warmth lingers on the glass. That warmth, by the way, shouldn't be there. This entire corridor is colder than a tax auditor's smile. You press your palm where the message was, and the glass pulses softly beneath your hand, almost like a heartbeat. Somewhere inside the walls, something clicks. Metal, precise, the sound of an old lock surrendering. The lady lowers her hand, and for the first time her veil lifts just enough for you to glimpse her mouth. She smiles, which is somehow both comforting and unsettling, because it's the kind of smile that says she's finally solved a problem you didn't know existed. She takes a step back, fades slightly, and whispers, "He never sent it." Her voice is the texture of paper burning. Then she's gone. Not the usual dramatic vanish, just a soft erasure, like someone wiping chalk off stone. You stand alone, staring at your reflection in the window, half expecting it to wink. Behind you, the portraits now hang straight again, all of them facing forward, and the air feels lighter, as if the whole corridor exhaled. You glance down and realize the floor beneath the window is dry, except for one tiny drop of melted wax glistening on the stone. You pick it up because apparently you collect cursed objects now, and slip it into your pocket, where it hums faintly like a bee trapped in amber. There's an old legend that says carrying a ghost's token can protect you from lesser spirits but attract stronger ones, the supernatural version of upgrading your Wi-Fi signal. As you head back toward the main hall, you notice faint footprints appearing in the dust behind you. Small, bare, and silver gray. She's walking with you, just quietly, invisibly, maybe curious how her story ends this time. At the base of the stairs, you pause to catch your breath, and the hum in your pocket vibrates once, a tiny signal of approval. You take that as permission to move on. Though, if this were a horror movie, the audience would already be yelling at you to leave. A gust of wind slams the great hall door open, scattering candlelight across the floor, and you catch a glimpse of the east tower beyond, its windows glowing faintly green again, like someone relit Osric's lantern for dramatic effect. But the sound now comes from the other side, the west wing, where the servants' quarters once stood, now just a warren of collapsed beams and echoes. That's where the jester was said to live, the one who laughed through the plague, the siege, and apparently through eternity. You sigh, because at this point the castle's turning into a networking event for ghosts, and you're the only one who didn't get the memo. You tighten your cloak again, imaginary but stylish, and step toward the laughter, realizing it's getting louder, closer, and oddly contagious. The laughter fades as you cross the courtyard, replaced by something stranger, a low hum that almost sounds like a tune, the kind of melody you hum without realizing, half memory, half habit. It comes from the ramparts, that line of cold stone where the wind likes to practice its ghost impressions. You follow the sound up a staircase slick with dew, the steps gleaming like fish scales under the moonlight. By the time you reach the top, the air has changed again, thinner, sharper, charged with the kind of static that usually precedes either a lightning strike or a conversation with the dead. The voice grows clearer now, a baritone so rich and melancholy that even the gargoyles seem to be listening. The song is old, older than the castle, maybe older than England itself, and you catch fragments of a language you don't recognize, something between Norman French and bedtime despair. When the figure finally comes into view, you're almost relieved he looks the part. Full armor, slightly spectral around the edges, the faint shimmer of chainmail catching moonlight like sequins for the undead. He's leaning against a crenellation as if waiting for applause, and in his gauntleted hand rests a lute that doesn't seem to obey physics. You watch the strings vibrate, though no fingers pluck them. The singing Knight of Arundel, ladies and gentlemen, or just you, because it's late, and this ghost doesn't get much audience anymore. You stay quiet as he finishes the verse, because interrupting a knight in mid-ballad feels like a violation of etiquette, and when he's done, the sound lingers in the air longer than it should. He turns, his visor lifting just enough for you to see eyes that glow faintly blue, like candle flames behind glass. "You heard the chorus?" he asks, his voice surprisingly conversational, the sort of tone you'd expect from a history professor too tired to grade essays. You nod because that seems like the polite thing to do, and he chuckles, a sound that clinks faintly as if his ribs still wear armor. Good, he says. It's been 7 centuries since anyone did. According to local legend, the singing knight is Sir Aelfric of Arundel, a troubadour turned soldier who fought during the early Hundred Years' War and vanished after the siege of Calais. The only record of him that survives is a line in a 14th century inventory noting 1 lute of ivory, stained by sea. Some historians think he drowned returning home. Others, less fun ones, argue he never existed at all, claiming he's just a mashup of several romantic poems written by monks who'd clearly never met a woman. Either way, here he is, casually haunting the battlements with the confidence of someone who's used to encores. He gestures with the lute toward the horizon where the mist glows faintly over the fields. They used to light torches down there, he says. Signals. We'd sing to each other from tower to tower. Keep the soldiers awake. It's easier to stay brave when the melody knows your name. You glance at him, realizing the joke's on every motivational poster you've ever read. The air hums with his tune again, soft and looping, and you feel it settle somewhere between your ribs, the kind of song that feels like memory even if you've never heard it before. They called me mad, he continues, said music had no place in war. His voice lowers, tinged with irony. Funny how the quiet was what killed them. Aelfric's visor tilts upward, and for a moment you see his reflection mirrored against the moon. Half man, half mist, all melancholy. Then he laughs again, and the sound breaks the spell. You came for the ghosts, he says, but it's always the living who echo the loudest. A gust of wind sweeps through, carrying his melody down into the courtyard where it bounces off the stone like ripples in water. You could swear the castle itself hums in response, each wall vibrating with its own faint harmony. For a fleeting second, the whole place feels alive, like a cathedral built for sound instead of sermons. There's an old fringe theory about that actually. That medieval masons deliberately carved resonant frequencies into certain rooms to make visitors feel divine presence. Maybe that's why you're shivering right now. The knight studies you, head tilted, and his eyes dim a little, like lanterns running low on oil. You remind me of someone, he murmurs, a scribe who listened more than he wrote. You want to ask what that means, but he's already turning back toward the horizon, raising his lute for another verse. This time the melody's lighter, almost cheerful, and you think you catch a lyric about wine and regret, which, let's be honest, covers most of human history. Then something unexpected happens. A faint, second voice joins in from below. Higher, sweeter, unmistakably female. You lean over the battlement and spot a glimmer near the chapel window. The lady in the silver veil, her translucent hand pressed to the glass again, singing the harmony. The two voices weave together through the night air, and suddenly the courtyard becomes a stage for a duet centuries overdue. You watch, spellbound, as the knight's figure grows brighter with each note, his armor reflecting not light but memory. When the song ends, both voices fade, leaving only the sound of your heartbeat and one very confused crow. The knight turns once more, visor open now, revealing a face that flickers between youth and decay like a faulty candle. She waited for my song, he says softly. I should have sent it sooner. The admission hangs there, heavy as the night itself. You realize, with the slow dread of a historian connecting the wrong dots, that the letter the lady carried might have been his. Never sent, never read, forever looping through time as an unfinished duet. He looks at you one last time. If you see her again, he says, tell her I found the right key. You open your mouth to promise, but before you can speak, the wind takes him, armor, lute and all, into a swirl of silver dust that sparkles briefly, then vanishes into the sky. Silence reclaims the ramparts, thick and absolute. You exhale slowly, half expecting applause, half expecting an existential crisis. Instead, You just feel tired in that oddly peaceful way you get after finishing a sad movie you knew would hurt. Somewhere below, a door creaks open, and the faint smell of bread wafts up from the kitchens, except this castle hasn't had a working oven in centuries. You follow the scent because of course you do, descending the spiral stairs as the echo of Elfric's song trails you like a lullaby. And as you reach the courtyard again, the glow of the east tower has gone out entirely, but the kitchen windows flicker with firelight. Someone's cooking, or haunting, maybe both. The smell of bread turns out to be optimism's cruelest prank. When you push through the warped oak door into what used to be the castle kitchen, there's no bread, no warmth, no happy bustle of ghostly bakers kneading the afterlife's dough. There's only dust, ash, and a smell so old it might qualify as fossilized soup. The hearth dominates the far wall, wide enough to roast a cow, blackened by centuries of good intentions and bad recipes. A massive bronze bell hangs crookedly above it, tethered to a fraying rope that disappears through the ceiling. The clapper inside trembles slightly, though no wind moves. You take one step forward and the bell tolls once, a hollow sound that fills the room like a slow heartbeat. Then another toll, softer this time, and the air grows colder. Not cold like winter, but cold like a memory trying to be noticed. You know who it is before he arrives. The kitchen of every cursed abbey has one. The headless friar, the eternal dinner host who never quite got to bless the meal. He appears beside the hearth in a shimmer of gray light, his robes billowing gently, his neck ending in a soft mist that curls where a face should be. You half expect it to whistle like a kettle. Instead, a calm voice issues from nowhere in particular, perfectly clear, perfectly polite. "You're late," he says. You glance at the bell and realize it's moving again, each swing perfectly in time with the words. "Dinner is served," the voice adds, with the kind of grim cheer only a monk with missing anatomy could muster. The friar gestures, inclines his shoulders toward a long wooden table you could swear wasn't there a second ago. It's set for 8, complete with pewter plates and goblets that glow faintly from within, as though lit by their own quiet guilt. You blink once and see figures seated there, transparent monks in threadbare habits, their heads bowed, hands folded. The air smells suddenly of roasted meat and sweet wine, the ghostly scent of a meal no one ever finished. A historical record does mention an order of mendicant friars stationed here in the late 1200s, known for brewing something called St. Dunstan's Ale, which contemporary sources described as vigorously spiritual. The abbey burned down during a lightning storm, and rumor claimed the head cook refused to leave, insisting on ringing the supper bell one last time to summon his brothers. They found his body days later, charred but upright, still clutching the rope. His head was never recovered. That's your fun fact of the night. Medieval bells were sometimes believed to repel storms by breaking the devil's thunder, which, statistically speaking, worked about as well as singing to volcanoes. You sit, because refusing an invitation from a headless friar feels rude, and the temperature drops another few degrees. One of the ghostly monks looks up. His face is serene, expression carved in sorrow and relief at once. He nods to you and mouths the words Benedictus sit, though no sound comes out. Then, all at once, the table flickers and the food appears solid. Bread steaming, a roast glistening, candles flickering as if fed by unseen breath. You realize the friar's trying to finish something. The supper bell tolls again, slower now, and the monks raise their cups in unison. The voice returns. For those who left hungry. You lift your cup, out of instinct more than bravery, and the moment your fingers brush the cold pewter, a vivid image slams into your mind. A flash of fire, the friar pulling at the bell rope as smoke fills the kitchen, shouting prayers into heat that ignores them. You see him reach for the door, hesitate, and look back at the table, where the other monks wait, eyes closed, hands folded. Then everything freezes in gold light and dissolves back into the present. When you open your eyes, the ghosts are gone. The table remains, but the plates are empty now. The candles burnt down to puddles of wax that spell faint Latin letters, ora pro nobis. Pray for us. The bell tolls one final time, softer than a whisper, and from the shadows the friar's voice sighs, at last they're full. The mist around his neck rises like incense, and for a heartbeat you think you see a faint outline of a face, a kind smile framed by shadow. Then the air folds inward, and the kitchen becomes just a kitchen again. You stand, brushing ghost crumbs from your sleeves, and notice something glinting in the ashes by the hearth. It's a small iron key, ancient but intact, shaped like a cross. When you pick it up, the cold metal hums faintly in your palm, the same tone as the supper bell. Somewhere deep in the castle, another bell answers. You pause, listening as the sound travels through corridors, up staircases, echoing into distance. A chain reaction of history waking up. The friar's final service, maybe, unlocking what's next. You tuck the key into your pocket, next to the drop of wax from the lady's letter. Both warm slightly, as if recognizing each other. Maybe ghosts gossip, maybe relics resonate. Either way, the kitchen feels lighter now. Less tragic, like a room finally at peace with its bad Yelp reviews. You walk toward the exit, glancing back once at the hearth. For a moment, you think you see movement. Just heat distortion, surely. But the shape looks suspiciously like someone bowing. Outside, dawn isn't close, but the clouds have shifted enough to let moonlight spill into the courtyard again. The smell of smoke lingers on your clothes, sweet and faint, the scent of something finally released, and as you step across the threshold, the supper bell tolls once more. Distant now, fading toward the west tower where another story waits. You follow the sound, half expecting a joke, half hoping for silence, but that's the trouble with haunted castles, they always keep something cooking. The western corridor narrows until you're practically brushing both walls, the stone damp and chill against your fingertips. The supper bell's echo has faded, replaced by a smaller, almost rhythmic sound. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. The unmistakable pattern of something tiny knocking from behind the wall. You freeze halfway down the passage, because if horror movies have taught you anything, it's that nothing good ever knocks politely. The noise continues, faint but insistent, coming from beneath the grand staircase that once led to the Lord's private quarters. The space underneath is sealed by a wooden panel painted centuries ago with a pastoral scene. Shepherds, sheep, a river. Now the paint's cracked, the shepherds faceless, the sheep reduced to lumps of beige and bad decisions. The knocking stops the moment you crouch, as if whatever's in there has been caught. Then, after a heartbeat, 3 tiny knocks answer again, quicker this time, like a child's impatient game of hide-and-seek. You hesitate. Then curiosity wins, as usual, and you pull the panel loose. Dust rolls out in a gray sigh, and with it a faint scent of chalk and lavender. Inside is darkness, but not empty darkness. Somewhere deeper in, you hear the soft shuffle of movement. Then a whisper. Is it morning? The voice is small, uncertain, the sound of someone who's been asking that question for centuries. You peer inside and see the faint outline of toys scattered on the stone floor. A wooden horse missing a leg, a spinning top, a cloth doll with a painted face so faded it's almost featureless. And then you notice footprints, small and bare, glowing faintly like chalk drawings brought to life. They move when you breathe. You whisper hello because apparently you never learn. And from the shadows, something giggles. The legend of the children beneath the staircase is older than the castle's own records. It's said that during the Black Death, the noble family sealed their youngest heirs inside a small chamber to keep them safe while the plague passed through. The servants left food by the door. When they came back days later, the food was untouched, and the laughter had stopped. No one reopened the chamber until a later renovation, when masons found two small skeletons sitting upright against the wall, their hands still clasped. It's the kind of story even skeptics retell quietly, as though the ghosts can overhear. Some historians argue it's folklore, a morality tale about greed and quarantine. Others insist the bones were real. Records mention a secret nursery in the 1360s sealed again for holy reasons. You can pick your version. Both end in silence. But this silence is restless. The toys shift again, the wooden horse toppling onto its side. You reach out and your fingers brush something warm. A child's hand, small, light as air. The giggle returns, followed by another, until the entire hollow hums softly with laughter that shouldn't exist. It's not cruel, just lonely. A sound like forgotten wind chimes. The air fills with the scent of chalk dust and sun-warmed linen, the ghost memory of playtime. Then one of the voices whispers, "We can come out now." It's not a question you can answer. Your throat tightens, but before you can speak, the lantern light from the hall catches a faint carving on the inner wall. A child's drawing of the castle itself, crooked but recognizable. At its base, two small stick figures hold hands beneath an enormous sun. Someone has scratched a later inscription below it. Play quietly, they sleep above. You don't want to think about what that means. The air grows colder. The laughter fades to breathing. You see the faint outlines of two small figures seated side by side, one clutching the headless doll, the other holding a round object that might be the missing horse's wheel. Their heads tilt in unison, curious, like you're the strange one. "Do you know the song?" the smaller one asks. Before you can answer, they start humming. Soft, simple, a tune you vaguely recognize from the bell tower earlier, only lighter, like a lullaby version of the friar's final prayer. The melody wraps around you until you can't tell if it's in the air or your bones. Then, as if satisfied, they fade back into shadow. The warmth in your hand vanishes. Only the wooden horse remains, upright again now, standing perfectly still. You slide the panel back into place, but the knocking doesn't resume. Instead, a new sound emerges, a faint rattling above you, the creak of floorboards, the unmistakable patter of small feet running across a ceiling that shouldn't exist. It circles once, twice, then stops directly overhead. You wait, heart doing interpretive dance moves, but nothing follows, just the lingering scent of lavender and old laughter. You whisper a quick goodnight because politeness seems to work with this castle and turn toward the courtyard. Behind you, the panel hums faintly, a soft vibration like a heartbeat trapped in the wall. Maybe they're finally asleep, or maybe they're just waiting for the next game. As you step back into the moonlight, the air feels lighter again, crisp, almost forgiving. The castle's windows glimmer faintly as if exhaling. And somewhere in the east tower you think you hear the faint pluck of a lute string, one single note hanging in the night. It's answered by the faintest giggle from beneath the floor. For the first time, the sound doesn't chill you, it just feels human. You walk away quietly, leaving the children to their endless bedtime. The courtyard has gone still again, though the air carries a faint echo of laughter. Thin, stretched, as if the joke's been told for centuries and no one has dared stop laughing. You follow it toward the old banquet hall, where ivy spills through broken windows like nature reclaiming its rent. Inside, moonlight glints off long tables warped by age, their surfaces scarred with knife marks, burn rings, and the ghosts of feasts gone wrong. In the center of it all sits a single wooden chair, painted in flaking red and gold, tilted backward at a lazy angle. Draped across its arm is a cap and bell collar, the fabric so faded it's practically fossilized. When you step closer, the bells jingle softly, though you haven't touched them. Then, from somewhere near the rafters, a voice, Dry, amused, unmistakably human, says, "Don't worry. The punchline's not lethal." He appears in a shimmer of candlelight that wasn't there a moment ago. The castle's jester, half transparent and wholly insufferable, lounging upside down on one of the beams as though gravity were merely a suggestion. His grin is too wide, his eyes too bright, the kind of expression you'd expect from someone who died mid-gig and decided the show must go on. "Welcome to the Laughter Hall," he says, flipping upright and landing with a sound that's more thought than footstep. I'd bow, but I lost the audience centuries ago. You can't help smiling, because his voice carries that odd warmth of someone who knows exactly how ridiculous eternity can be. According to one tattered court record, the jester, real name unknown, served under Lord Banbury in the late 1400s. Banbury was famous for hosting elaborate banquets during times of famine, inviting starving peasants to watch nobles eat to inspire ambition. The jester, disgusted, supposedly cracked one joke too many about the Lord's gluttony and was found the next morning hanging from a beam right above the feast table, bells still tinkling. Or so the story goes. Some historians think he never existed, pointing out that every English castle seems to claim a tragic clown somewhere in its resume. But Banbury's ghost doesn't care about peer review. He winks at you, tips his invisible hat, and says, "You know what's funny about dying? The timing." You ask nothing. He does all the talking. "They buried me in the courtyard, face down," he says, pacing theatrically. "Said it would keep me from laughing at the guests. Joke's on them. I've got range." He gestures toward the wall, where faint burn marks form a perfect outline of a stage curtain. "Every night I tell a new story. The trick is keeping it from getting too funny. Laughter, you see, feeds ghosts. Sadness just makes them poetic." He stops suddenly, tilting his head, listening to something you can't hear. "They're still eating," he whispers. "Every night the same feast, the same toast, the same silence after." You glance toward the high table, and sure enough, faint silhouettes shimmer into view. Nobles in doublets and jewels, motionless except for the slow raising of their goblets. Then the jester claps once, and they vanish like bad stage smoke. He bows toward you, solemn now. "Someone has to end the act," he says, "but not tonight. You're not ready for the encore." His grin fades slightly, replaced by something almost human. "Tell the children under the stairs to stop knocking. It ruins my rhythm." Before you can respond, he spins once, his bells jingling like laughter trapped in glass, and dissolves into the air. Only the chair remains, still rocking gently, as though he's still there, unseen but amused. You turn toward the doorway, ready to leave, when you hear one last line float through the hall. "Don't trip over my punch line." The chair stops rocking, the bells fall silent. Outside, the wind picks up, carrying the faint sound of giggles mixed with song from the east tower, maybe from nowhere. You step into the night, realizing that in this castle, even laughter has a haunting schedule. By the time you cross the courtyard again, the laughter has thinned into wind, and the castle exhales like a tired organ pipe. A low creek guides you toward the northern wing, an area so drafty it should come with a weather warning. The door there is enormous, warped by damp and royal ego, carved with a coat of arms that's mostly eroded away, except for a single motto, "Semper Frigus, always cold." It fits. Inside, the air is sharp as breath on winter glass. Dust cloaks everything like snow, and the corridor seems longer than physics allows, stretching toward a shimmer of candlelight that shouldn't exist. This, according to the locals, is the domain of the Duchess of Draughty Halls, a woman whose ghost is said to rearrange furniture out of eternal irritation. You can almost hear her voice now, the sigh of someone who's been trying to fix a crooked tapestry for 400 years. You step into what used to be her private solar, a grand sitting room filled with faded silks, empty fireplaces, and enough mirrors to suggest an ego that survived death intact. The curtains shiver even without wind. And then, very faintly, a shape emerges, tall, elegant, translucent, and unmistakably judgmental. She's wrapped in layers of gauze-like fabric that flutter as if underwater, and her face, though half-faded, still manages the aristocratic expression of someone unimpressed by the living. "Oh, it's you," she says, voice dripping with polite despair. "Another tourist." You blink, because she's not screaming, not moaning, just radiating the calm fury of a woman who once ran an estate and still disapproves of your posture. The historical footnote. Lady Isolde de Corwin, Duchess of Carden, built this hall around 1472, famous for hosting endless winter banquets and for demanding that servants heat every room to spring in Provence levels, despite the lack of fireplaces. Records show she died of pneumonia after ordering the windows opened for ambiance. Her ghost reportedly returned 2 weeks later to complain about the draft. "Do you know what it's like," she says now, gesturing toward the arched ceiling, "to freeze for 5 centuries in one's own parlor?" You shake your head and she nods gravely, the universal gesture of someone confirming you could never understand. She drifts closer, her gown whispering across the floor like silk caught in a sigh. The temperature drops another few degrees. Candles gutter out, one by one, until only the mirror behind her reflects a faint blue light. You glance into it and see not just her reflection but dozens of others, servants, guests, all shivering in silence as she scolds invisible drafts. "I rearrange," she says, "to remind them I'm still here. If you move a chair, you must commit to it." She glares toward the far end of the room where, indeed, one chair sits slightly off-center from the rug. "He never listened," she mutters. "My husband insisted the chair faced east for morning light, as if I needed God's approval to have tea." She snaps her fingers and the chair slides neatly into place. The air warms by a fraction, like she's soothed for now. There's a fringe theory among paranormal scholars that temperature anomalies in hauntings often align with memory rather than anger. The spirit reliving a final discomfort. You wonder if that's what's happening here. A duchess forever trapped in the cold she created. She seems to read your thought. "You think I deserve it," she says softly, her voice shifting from frost to sadness. "Perhaps I do, but I only wanted everything perfect." She turns toward the mirror, her reflection blurring as if the glass itself is melting. "Perfection," she murmurs, "is very cold company." For the first time she smiles. A small, tired thing that barely survives the chill, and then her form ripples, folds, and dissolves into a cascade of frost that settles across the room like new snow. When you exhale, your breath clouds in the air. The candles reignite themselves one by one with soft pops of blue flame. The room feels aligned, every chair centered, every curtain perfectly still. You take a step back toward the door, careful not to disturb anything, and bow slightly to the empty air. It seems the right thing to do. Outside, the wind has gentled. Somewhere in the castle, the supper bell chimes once, a sound so faint you might mistake it for settling wood. The Duchess of Draughty Halls, it seems, is finally content with the arrangement. For now, you find the laboratory by smell before sight. Sulfur, vinegar, and something sharper. A scent like wet metal humming against your teeth. It comes from the eastern courtyard's lowest arch, where a door hangs open on one hinge as though the last person to use it left in a hurry and never returned. You step inside, the stone walls closing around you, the air turning slick and close, shelves grown under bottles half filled with powders the color of crushed emeralds and old bones. On one bench rests a brass astrolabe, still glimmering faintly despite the dust, its dial frozen on a date that doesn't exist, the 13th of Never. The locals call this the alchemist's vault, and no one cleans here anymore. Not since the fire that left one whole wall scorched black and one persistent green glow pulsing behind the soot. The flame sits inside a cracked alembic, still alive centuries after its creator was not. It's the size of a plum, pale jade, burning without smoke, fuel, or apology. Its light paints everything around it in sickly color. Gold becomes moss, skin becomes seawater, even your shadow looks envious. The legend says the flame belonged to Magister Corbin, an alchemist employed by the Duke in the late 1300s to turn base matter into something worth collecting taxes on. Corbin was rumored to have succeeded too well. Chronicles mention he presented the Duke with a goblet that filled itself with wine whenever touched, followed shortly by one that filled itself with blood instead. When the laboratory exploded one night, the Duke's men found only Corbin's ring fused into the floor, and this flame still burning, unbothered by the lack of oxygen or explanation. Historians argue whether Corbin was a genuine scientist or a medieval con artist with excellent branding. The debate persists. Half chemistry, half theology, entirely too flammable. You edge closer, the flame humming louder the nearer you get. It sounds almost like a voice, pitched just beyond understanding, syllables forming and vanishing before you can grasp them. The air thickens until your lungs feel full of mint and static. You reach out a hand because human curiosity is evolution's practical joke, and the instant your fingertip crosses the glow, the room changes. You're standing in the same place, yet the walls gleam new, the air warm with life. The alchemist himself stands before you, solid, wild-eyed, sleeves rolled up to his elbows, muttering prayers and equations into the air. Heat is hunger, he says, stirring a cauldron that shimmers with liquid light, and hunger is divine. You try to step back, but your boots won't move. You're anchored in someone else's memory. Corbin lifts a vial toward the ceiling, watching it catch the lamplight. If the church will not grant heaven, he says, then I shall manufacture it. He pours the contents into a crucible, and the green flame bursts to life, the same exact hue now burning across time. The explosion follows in silence. No heat, no smoke, just a bright inversion of everything, and then you're back. The lab's cold again. The flame still burns, but now faint symbols shimmer on the wall behind it, circles within triangles, Latin phrases looping endlessly. Ignis vivit, mors dormit. Fire lives, death sleeps. You blink, and the words vanish like mist. Somewhere above you, a chain rattles, and you realize a small ventilation shaft is open, puffing out air warmer than the rest. The draft carries whispers, faint and regular, like a chant echoing through the stone. The tone is familiar. It's the same low hum you've been hearing from different corners of the castle all night. The friar's bell, the knight's song, the children's lullaby, they share a rhythm. It's as if the entire place is harmonizing through centuries. One long, unbroken note. You back away from the bench, careful not to disturb anything. The green light licks the edges of the room like a living thing. At the doorway, you pause and glance back once more. The flame pulses as if aware of you, then splits for a heartbeat into two smaller lights before rejoining itself. Maybe a farewell. Maybe a warning. There's a joke somewhere about curiosity and combustion, but you're too tired to make it. You step into the hall, closing the door behind you, though the light still seeps through the cracks, glowing faintly like envy that refuses to die. As you walk away, the echoing hum follows, steady, rising, almost musical, an unfinished chord that the castle keeps replaying, waiting for someone foolish enough to finish it. Tonight, that might still be you. The hum follows you out into the courtyard, and then thickens, changing rhythm until it becomes something heavier, slower, a drum beat muffled by centuries of stone. At first you think it's thunder, but then you notice how perfectly timed it is, steady as a heartbeat, and coming from beneath your feet. You walk toward the western wall where the battlements rise against the starless sky, the stones blackened by smoke and memory. The air tastes like iron, and the ground trembles slightly with each pulse. When you reach the old tower gate, you realize what you're hearing isn't weather at all, it's marching. the sound of an army that no longer exists, still circling the castle walls long after its bones turn to dust. The siege of Wexmere Castle is the oldest story tied to this place. In 1315, a rival lord surrounded the fortress for 31 days, cutting off food and water until the defenders, desperate, fired flaming arrows soaked in pitch across the moat. The chronicles claim the last arrow hit a barrel of oil and turned the night into daylight. Both sides burned. When the smoke cleared, only the walls stood, and apparently, the echo of that final stand. Modern historians call it folklore exaggerated by trauma, pointing out that no archaeological dig has ever found a moat here. But every few decades, people claim to hear the drums again. Always on nights like this, fog rolling, stars missing, time half asleep. You cross the threshold into the outer yard, and nearly stumble over a pile of stones that weren't there earlier. They're arranged like barricades, small heaps of rubble stacked with military precision. The air around them vibrates faintly, and when you look up you see ghostly figures lining the walls, men in armor half-formed from smoke, their faces pale outlines behind visors. Some aim bows, others raise shields, all frozen mid-defiance. A banner you can't quite read flutters above the gate, its colors wrong for this century. The wind stops entirely, but the sound of the siege continues. The rhythmic thud of catapults, the hiss of arrows, the shouted orders of commanders whose voices are buried under dust. It's not chaos, it's a loop, a perfect repetition. The same noises play in the same sequence, over and over, like the castle itself is a record stuck on history's loudest groove. Then, something changes. One of the soldiers, a young one, maybe 15 when he died, turns his head toward you. His eyes glow faintly, twin reflections of the green flame you left behind in the laboratory. "You shouldn't be here," he says quietly, though his lips don't move. His words arrive as vibrations in the air, more felt than heard. "We haven't won yet." Another soldier beside him shouts a command, and the world around you shifts again. The ground ripples, the sky brightens with orange light, and for a few seconds you're standing in the middle of the siege itself. The castle walls pulse with firelight, arrows streak overhead, and you feel heat against your cheeks. Soldiers rush past, some living, some transparent, too busy dying to notice you. Above it all, the drums pound faster, building toward something that never resolves. You duck beneath a broken archway, heart hammering, and catch sight of the commander, a bearded man in chainmail barking orders that echo like thunder. His eyes flick toward you for the briefest instant, and you realize he sees you not as a ghost but as something unfamiliar. "Run," he shouts, pointing toward the gate. The flames taken hold. You turn, and sure enough, the courtyard center blazes with that same unnatural green fire, climbing upward in tendrils that twist like vines. Soldiers fall back, shielding their faces, their armor melting into light. You blink, and suddenly it's gone. The fire, the commander, the noise, the courtyard stands empty again. Only the faint smell of smoke remains, sweet and chemical. There's a theory, more fringe than fact, that certain battlefields retain residual energy, memories trapped by trauma replaying themselves like broken film reels. You stand in the quiet, wondering whether what you saw was history's glitch or someone's unfinished duty. At your feet lies a rusted arrowhead, still warm though the air is freezing. You pick it up. It hums faintly, matching the rhythm of the drum beats fading into silence. Another souvenir for your growing collection of regrets. The moon emerges at last, pale and disinterested, washing the courtyard in silver. You look up at the ramparts and see movement. Just a flicker. One soldier lowering his bow, the outline of his face softening. Then the drums stop altogether. The air stills and the army fades like mist in sunlight. Only the walls remain, pockmarked and proud, as if they've been holding their breath for 700 years. You exhale slowly, feeling the weight lift, Maybe the siege really did end this time. Or maybe you're just the latest witness drafted into a battle that never learned how to finish dying. Either way, the castle's silent again, and in that silence, something new stirs from the north tower. A faint, wavering sound, the sad wail of a flute. The piper is awake, and you already know where you're going next. The sound of the flute drifts through the corridors like a thread pulling you north. It's faint but confident, played with the slow precision of someone who doesn't care if you catch up. You follow it past walls slick with condensation and doorways that sigh open on their own, until you reach the stone bridge connecting the main keep to a smaller tower, leaning slightly toward the sea. The tune grows louder now, sweet but off by one wrong note, an error so deliberate it hurts. According to the stories whispered around every tavern from Inverary to Oban, this is Duntroon's piper, a soldier captured centuries ago during a clan skirmish who played one final warning to his comrades even after his captors cut off his hand. The facts, such as they exist, say that a one-handed skeleton was indeed found bricked behind a tower wall when restorations began in 1790. The debate remains whether the tale is Scottish folklore or grim journalism. But here, right now, the melody makes the question feel redundant. The bridge moans under your weight as you cross. The sea below glitters black, the waves colliding against rock like slow applause. The music stops the instant you reach the other side, replaced by the steady hiss of wind through arrow slits. You enter the round tower, smaller than it looks from outside. The room smells of salt, damp cloth, and something faintly coppery, as if rust and memory share the same scent. On the far wall hangs a tattered banner, the colors indistinguishable, the fabric shifting even though there's no draft. You take a step closer, and from behind the banner comes the soft sound of fingers brushing strings, not a flute, but pipes, the ancient kind made of bone and wood, their tone both human and not. Then he's there, half shadow, half man. His form wavers like smoke trapped in glass, his left arm whole, his right ending in translucent light. The pipes are bound to his chest with ghostly twine, the drones humming a soft note that seems to vibrate in your lungs. He looks at you, and though his mouth doesn't move, the air fills with his voice. They came by night. I warned them. You can feel the words rather than hear them, rolling through your bones in low harmony. They didn't listen, he adds, almost kindly, as though excusing the dead for their lack of foresight. He turns toward the narrow window, the sea reflecting green fire from somewhere deep below the cliffs. You can still hear them. If you stand quiet, he says, you obey. For a moment the whole world stops. No wind, no tide. Then faintly from the horizon, another flute answers. The legend claims that each night the piper plays until dawn, and the echo from the sea is the answering tune of those he failed to save. Skeptics chalk it up to wind moving through the rock caverns beneath the keep, but the rhythm you hear now is too deliberate, too mournful to be coincidence. You ask softly, "Do you still play for them?" The piper's silhouette flickers, his head lowering as if remembering something distant. "Not for them," he murmurs, "for what might have been heard." The note he plays next is impossibly long, stretching through the room until the air itself seems to bow beneath it. The torches gutter out. The sea below stills completely. When the tone finally breaks, it leaves a silence that feels alive, as if the castle's been holding its breath for centuries and finally let go. On the floor, something gleams, a single finger bone, pale and polished, carved with lines like music notation. You kneel, tracing them, and realize they match the rhythm of the wrong note from earlier. The melody's flaw wasn't a mistake, it was a signature. The piper wasn't playing badly. He was leaving a name. When you look up, he's gone. The pipes resting against the wall like they've never been touched. Outside, dawn light brushes the horizon in muted gray, and the first gulls cry in the distance. The sound they make almost matches his final note, You pocket the carved bone, another relic of unfinished music, and step back across the bridge. The keep behind you hums once, a faint vibration like applause from somewhere deep inside the stones. You half bow without realizing it. In this castle, every ghost has earned an encore. The bridge's echo fades behind you, replaced by the quiet click of your boots against cold marble. Dawn should be lightening the castle, but somehow it feels darker now. Corridors stretched longer than before, the walls gleaming faintly as if wet. You pass beneath an arch carved with a royal crest so detailed that the stone lions look ready to yawn. Beyond it lies a chamber once belonging to a queen whose name no one dares say aloud anymore, mostly because the last chronicler to write it down lost his hand to an unfortunate transcription accident. The chamber is circular, lined entirely with mirrors framed in tarnished gold. Only one is unbroken, standing opposite the window like a sentinel. You feel its pull immediately, that magnetic sense of being watched by your own reflection even before you get close enough to see it. They call it the Queen's Mirror of Carnarvon, supposedly gifted to a consort of Edward II, who dabbled in the kind of mysticism that made priests uncomfortable. The legend says she used it to converse with her future, though what it showed her remains a secret. One servant's journal, discovered in the 1600s, mentioned that her reflection sometimes failed to move when she did. You approach it slowly, the air colder with each step, until you're standing close enough to fog the glass. For a heartbeat, the surface ripples, not a trick of light but an actual wave, as if the mirror breathes. Then your reflection steadies, almost, because standing beside you in the glass is another figure. A woman dressed in an elaborate gown of black and silver, her face pale and sharp as moonlight. She's not in the room, only in the reflection. Finally, she says, her voice calm and rich, echoing from inside the glass instead of the air. Someone who looks, you should leave. Obviously, but curiosity has never respected common sense, so you stay. The Queen's reflection tilts her head, studying you with faint amusement. Do you know what happens to a soul divided too long? She asks. Her expression flickers, once regal, once tired, once furious, all in the space of a blink. They stop knowing which side they're on. She steps closer in the mirror, though you haven't moved. For a second, your reflection and hers overlap. The glass hums faintly. The smell of rose oil and dust fills the air. I waited, she whispers, for the right face to appear. You notice now that the frame's carvings form tiny faces, servants, courtiers, even animals, each frozen mid-gasp. They weren't carved. They were molded. The detail too human to be coincidence. A known historical fact, Carnarvon's royal glassmaker vanished in 1328 while experimenting with molten reflections. Scholars later found an unsigned treatise suggesting that certain metals could capture memory and hold it within silver. Fringe theory, or not, it suddenly feels very relevant. The Queen lifts a gloved hand against the inside of the mirror, palm to palm with your own. Her fingers are ice, yet you feel heat radiate into your skin. Tell me, she says, is the world still full of men pretending they built it? The tone is sharp but weary. A queen still arguing through centuries. The glass clouds, showing flashes of something behind her. A throne room empty except for a single overturned crown. A banquet frozen mid-toast. And finally, a woman, her standing before this same mirror, pressing her hand against it from the other side. I traded my voice for my reflection, she murmurs. Now it speaks whether I wish it or not. Her face flickers between sorrow and smirk. Don't believe what you see. The glass lies to everyone but itself. You pull your hand away, and the surface flares green for an instant, the same hue as Corbin's alchemical fire. The Queen's eyes widen slightly. He lived, she says, almost to herself. Then the curse is unfinished. The reflection fractures just enough to ripple through your own image, bending it into something older, warier. Tell him his mirror works, she adds, voice thinning into static. Then the light vanishes. You step back. The room is empty again. Your reflection returns to normal, except for one detail. A faint outline of her silver crown now rests on your head in the glass, though your scalp feels nothing. You blink and it's gone. The air smells faintly of roses again, then fades. When you glance down, a hairline crack runs across the mirror's base, curling like a signature. It forms one Latin word, memini. I remember. You leave the chamber slowly, unwilling to turn your back on the glass for too long. Behind you, a soft laugh ripples once across the mirrors. Not cruel, not kind, just aware. In this castle, even reflections refuse to be forgotten. The hallway after the queen's mirror feels strangely warmer, perfumed faintly with roasted herbs and something buttery. Your stomach growls, apparently hunger ignores hauntings. You follow the smell through a stone arch carved with grapes and vines until you emerge into a vast banquet hall so immaculate it looks freshly set. Every candelabra burns with steady gold light. Every goblet glitters like it's been polished by invisible hands. The long table stretches the entire length of the room, draped in a crimson cloth that sways gently as if brushed by unseen guests. Dozens of plates gleam with food, pheasants glazed in honey, trenchers of steaming bread, bowls of pomegranate seeds, even pies so perfect they seem sculpted rather than baked. There are no servants, no people, no sound except the faint crackle of fire from a hearth that isn't lit. Then, as you step inside, the great door slams behind you, sealing the feast and you in the same breath. This is Warwick's most enduring legend. Every century, on the anniversary of the castle's grandest banquet, the spirits of the guests return to dine again. The historical feast was thrown in 1415 to celebrate the victory at Agincourt. The entire household, lords, knights, servants, perished days later when plague swept through the castle. The chronicler who survived wrote that he saw candles relight themselves above empty chairs. For centuries, guards swore that on certain nights the sound of laughter echoed through the deserted hall, silverware clinking without hands to hold it. You're now standing in that hall, and the air feels thick with expectation like an audience waiting for its cue. You take a cautious step toward the nearest plate. The smell intensifies. Sweet, savory, mouth-watering. You can almost taste it. Then a goblet tips slightly, the wine swirling though nothing touches it. A faint shape forms in the chair beside it. A shimmer, then the outline of a man in fine robes. Another beside him, and another. Within seconds, the table fills. Dozens of translucent diners, half solid, their faces flickering between life and memory. A woman laughs, head thrown back, the sound faintly distorted like it's playing through water. A knight raises a toast, his voice carrying the cheer of someone who doesn't yet know he's dead. Plates clatter, glasses ring. The entire hall is alive again, resuming its celebration as though 5 centuries hadn't passed. You stand frozen, trying not to breathe too loudly. The lady at the table's head lifts her goblet and turns slightly toward you. Her face is almost perfect, except her eyes' empty sockets glowing faint amber. "You're late," she says warmly. "Sit. Eat." You open your mouth to decline, but a chair slides back on its own beside you, the table rearranging itself with eerie politeness. You sit because resistance feels rude, and the chair would probably chase you anyway. A plate appears before you, filled with bread and meat so real you can see the steam curling from it. You pick up the knife. It's cold, weightless. The ghosts resume their laughter, fragments of old conversations rising around you like bubbles from a sunken ship. You catch snatches, the king's speech, the French surrender, Lady Catherine's pearls, echoes of triumph frozen mid-century. Then the tone shifts. A murmur passes along the table. Every goblet stills. The lady at the head rises, her form shimmering. "It's time," she says, voice suddenly solemn. The ghosts all raise their cups in unison and chant softly, "To the victory that cost us everything." Their faces blur, joy collapsing into horror. The air turns icy, the smell of food rots in a heartbeat. The bread on your plate blackens, the wine curdles into something thick and red. A sound swells, coughing, gasping, the unmistakable rhythm of plague spreading through a crowd. One by one the figures collapse into ash that never hits the floor, dissolving midair. The lady remains last, her amber eyes dimming as she turns to you. "We never finished the feast," she whispers. "We kept waiting for the living to forgive the dead." Then she fades, leaving only her crown behind on the table, a simple gold circlet glowing faintly with its own warmth. You stand, the hall silent again, the candles extinguished, only moonlight streaming through the high windows. The crown hums softly when you touch it, resonating with the same strange frequency that has followed you since the porter's first whisper. The tablecloth, once red, is now gray with centuries of dust. You set the crown down gently, unsure whether it's safer to take or leave it. As you turn to go, the door creaks open by itself, releasing you back into the corridor. Behind you, for just a second, faint laughter returns. One final toast echoing down the centuries. To the guest who stayed long enough to listen. Then the silence folds neatly over it, like napkins at the end of a meal. The passage from the banquet hall curves downward, its stones slick with condensation. You can hear water again, the slow trickle of the river that runs beneath the castle walls. The air thickens with mist carrying that metallic tang of rain-soaked iron. At the end of the corridor stands an arched doorway half collapsed by age, beyond which a small bridge stretches into the fog. The parapets are low, the stones uneven, as though the masons who built it were distracted by the arguing voices that still cling to it. Locals call it the Bridge of Wailing Lovers. Couples used to cross here on the night before a wedding, tossing silver coins into the water to ensure fidelity. The last pair who did so were found the next morning on opposite banks, one drowned, one missing, and the coins scattered on the stones like accusations. You step onto the bridge. Each footfall sends ripples through the mist that hangs waist-high, faintly luminous in the moonlight. Somewhere in the fog, two voices whisper, one soft and pleading, one sharp as breaking glass. "You promised," the woman says, "and you lied." The man's reply comes a heartbeat later. "I kept my promise. You just changed what it meant." The echo slides back and forth across the water, impossible to locate. Then you see them, two pale outlines at opposite ends of the bridge, fading in and out like candlelight in a breeze. The woman's gown drags along the stones, wet with a color that refuses to stay gray. The man's cloak flutters though the air is still. They move toward each other slowly, the mist parting like a stage curtain. The legend paints them as Leora and Thomas, a noble's daughter and a stonemason's apprentice who built this bridge himself. When her father arranged her marriage to another man, the lovers met here to flee at dawn. But the father's guards found them first. Thomas was struck down and thrown into the river. Leora, desperate, leapt after him. Neither body was recovered. Only their voices, which people say return whenever the moon sits low and the river runs cold. A single record in the parish ledger supports part of it. Two names struck through in the same week of 1382, noted only as missing by water. Historians argue it's coincidence. The fog argues otherwise. You stand midway as the figures draw closer. The mist brightens, the air trembling like a plucked string. "I waited," the woman says, her tone brittle. "You never came." The man's shape flickers, thinner now. "I was already beneath you," he answers. Their words overlap, dissolving into a low wail that carries down river. The sound isn't just grief. It's wind forced through centuries of regret. The bridge stones under your feet vibrate faintly. humming in sympathy. You realize the noise is the same pitch as the porter's first gate, the friar's bell, the piper's note. The castle hums through them, all connected, one endless lament passed from ghost to ghost. The two figures finally meet in the middle. For a moment their outlines merge, light within light, then flare blindingly before breaking apart again, drifting to opposite sides as if pulled by invisible chains. "It won't let us," the woman whispers, her voice now in your ear. "It keeps the broken near the stone." You glance down and the bridge's mortar lines glow faint green, the alchemist's hue again threading through the cracks like veins. Whatever Corbin forged, it's still breathing in the architecture. You crouch, touch the nearest glowing seam. It's warm, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The woman's voice softens. "End it for us." You whisper. You don't know how. The fog shivers, then clears just enough to reveal a single coin resting on the central stone. Silver, tarnished, but unmistakably real. You pick it up. The metal hums in your palm. "Toss it," the man says, his tone resigned. "Break the circle." You hesitate, then flick the coin into the river. It spins once, catches the moonlight, and vanishes beneath the current. The air exhales. The glow fades. The fog lifts in slow spirals until the bridge stands plain and silent. The voices are gone. Only the soft rush of water remains, steady and content. When you turn back toward the castle, the path behind you gleams faintly with moisture, though no rain has fallen. A single droplet slides from your sleeve, cold, clear, and shimmering with that same green reflection before it disappears. Somewhere above, the supper bell tolls once, softer than breath. For the first time tonight, the castle sounds almost relieved, as though one small sorrow has finally stopped repeating. You walk on, the river's calm fading behind you, and in the distance, another sound begins to rise, a chant echoing from deep below the crypt, rhythmic and heavy, waiting to pull you toward the next haunting. The chant begins as a vibration underfoot, a pulse too deep for the ear, too deliberate for coincidence. You follow it down a spiral staircase, slick with condensation, the air thickening until it feels like walking through a throat. The steps end at a heavy iron door carved with a cross whose edges have melted from age or fire. On the lintel above, faint letters read "Clausum est verbis," closed to words. The door is ajar, though the lock still hangs fastened. Somehow it's open without being unlocked, a paradox that feels perfectly ordinary by this point in the castle's mood. You push, and it sighs inward on hinges that sound like a choir breathing. The chamber beyond is small, domed, and lined with iron hooks that hold nothing. At the center sits a wooden chair bolted to the floor. Chains hang from its arms, their ends fused into rusted lumps. Upon the chair rests a figure in a monk's robe, still upright after who knows how many centuries. His cowl hides his face, but the glint of metal beneath the hood gives him away. The infamous monk in the iron mask. According to fragmentary records from 1356, this chamber served as both a confessional and a prison for heretical clergy. Some say the masked monk was a Benedictine accused of translating forbidden texts, others that he was a royal spy masquerading as one. The mask, forged to silence him, was riveted shut before his death, yet the chronicles never name him, referring only to the silent brother. Scholars still argue whether he existed at all, or if his legend sprouted from fears of censorship and plague-era paranoia. Standing here, though, the air feels too alive for myth. Each breath carries the faint scent of soot and beeswax, the residue of centuries-old penance. You take a step closer. The chains clink, softly at first, then in rhythm, 3 slow taps pause, 3 again. It's Morse-like, but older, more instinctive, a heartbeat trying to remember itself. The iron mask catches the lantern light, reflecting a dull green sheen, the alchemist's echo once more. You followed the hum, a voice says, muffled but articulate. It doesn't come from the air. It comes from inside the mask, vibrating the metal. They all do eventually. You freeze because there's no movement, no breathing, just sound shaped out of resonance. The monk tilts his head slightly, the sound of grinding metal accompanying the gesture. I spoke too much once, he says. Now my silence speaks for me. You ask, quietly, what he means, though your voice feels disrespectful in the heavy air. Words, he replies, were the first prison. They chained the mind long before the flesh learned how. He gestures toward the floor, where faint inscriptions spiral outward from the chair. Latin phrases looping endlessly, intersecting one another like the grooves of a record. You kneel to read one. Verbum ignis estimated the word is fire. Another, silex memoriae. The stone remembers. As you trace the carvings, the chamber begins to vibrate again. The light in your lantern dims until only the iron mask glows faintly, as though lit from within. He found it, the monk murmurs, the green flame. He thought he could free us all. His tone holds neither praise nor condemnation, only weariness. But every fire makes its own smoke. You've seen it. The castle breathes because of him. The walls groan, the vibration deepening. You step back instinctively. Tell me, the monk says, when the living remember the dead, who imprisons whom? The mask hums louder. Tiny lines of light seep from its seams. Release me, he whispers, not from the iron, but from the echo. You reach toward the mask, unsure what to touch, when the sound abruptly spikes, a pure, deafening tone that rattles your teeth. The iron splits across the faceplate like cracking porcelain, releasing a single sigh of air that smells of parchment and burnt honey. The monk's form slumps, the robes folding inward until only the mask remains on the chair. The air clears, the hum ceases. You pick up the mask. It's lighter than you expect, almost warm, etched inside with that same looping pattern you saw beneath his feet. The grooves glow faintly green, pulsing in time with your heartbeat. Somewhere above, a door slams. The castle adjusts, exhaling dust through its ancient lungs. You sense the change immediately. The background hum that's haunted every corridor has shifted pitch, higher now, thinner, like a candle flame stretching. The silence that follows feels clean, newly swept. You set the mask down on the altar beside the chair, unsure whether you've broken something sacred or mended it. The chains at your feet crumble into rust. When you leave the chamber, the staircase seems shorter, the air fresher. From far above comes the faint sound of running water, echoing from the next level of the keep. It's rhythmic, almost musical, not unlike a painter rinsing his brushes. You follow the sound, lantern trembling in your grip, while behind you the iron mask's glow fades at last, leaving the chamber dark and, for the first time in centuries, utterly silent. The stairwell curves upward into a corridor painted from end to end, with saints whose faces have long since peeled away. Their halos remain, though glowing faintly in the dim lantern light, rings of oxidized gold leaf catching every flicker. The sound of water grows louder, trickling rhythmically behind the walls. When you reach the landing, the scent of linseed oil hits you first, rich and sickly sweet. It shouldn't be here. The last painter died centuries ago. Yet the smell is fresh, and with it comes another, iron, sharp and unmistakable. The doorway ahead stands open, revealing what was once the castle chapel, but now looks more like an artist's fever dream. Frescoes cover every inch of wall and ceiling. Vivid scenes of angels, martyrs, and storm clouds bursting over burning cities. Every figure bleeds, but elegantly, as though the artist loved his subjects too much to let them die cleanly. In the far corner, a palette and brush rest on a stool, the bristles glistening wet. The color on them is not quite red, not quite brown, something in between that memory refuses to name. The painter's story is half history, half scandal. His name was Matteo di Rosa, a Florentine prodigy invited north in 1490 to decorate this chapel for a pious duke who wanted heaven immortalized in plaster. Matteo obeyed too literally. He worked night and day until the servants noticed he was mixing pigments that no one could account for. When they pried open the jars after his death, the colors had turned to dust except the crimson, which stayed wet, bright, and warm to the touch. Rumor said he'd found a recipe that used his own blood. Skeptics call it alchemical nonsense, yet the hue remains luminous after 500 years, immune to fading and repentance. You approach the main wall where a half-finished fresco dominates, an angel kneeling before a fire that burns green at its core. The alchemist's shade again, threaded now through divine imagery. The brush on the stool trembles as though stirred by breath. Then a whisper, male, cultured, half amusement, half exhaustion. I painted what I saw. The voice comes from everywhere at once. You glance at the fresco and nearly step back. The angel's eyes move, slowly opening, pupils like drops of vermilion. You're still watching. The voice continues. Good. It's lonely being admired. A shape peels itself from the wall, thin as smoke and tinted the same red as the paint. The painter stands before you, shirt sleeves rolled, hair clotted with color, his hands stained to the wrists. He regards you with the practiced boredom of a man who has already outlived his critics. They said I used my blood, he murmurs, as if art ever demanded less. He moves toward the unfinished section, passing straight through you, leaving a chill that smells faintly of iron filings. The Duke wanted saints, he says, dabbing the air with an invisible brush. I gave him mirrors. He gestures toward a row of frescoed faces along the lower wall, each one familiar. You realize, horrified, they resemble the portraits you passed earlier. The Duchess, the Jester, the Friar. Their stories are captured here, frozen mid-expression, mouths half open as if still speaking. The painter smiles faintly. Every soul that lingers leaves color. I only showed it. The ceiling flickers. The painted clouds seem to move. A drop of something wet lands on your cheek. Paint or blood, you can't tell. He tried to stop me, Matteo says, meaning the alchemist. Said some walls shouldn't remember. He looks upward where a crack runs across the vaulted arch like a vein. But memory bleeds through everything. His eyes catch the lantern's light, glimmering the same green as Corbin's flame. Do you want to see how a story ends? He asks. You don't answer. He takes silence for consent. He presses his hand against the fresco. The paint liquefies, rippling outward until the entire wall becomes a moving tableau. Ghosts walking, singing, feasting. The same lives you've encountered, replaying as brushstrokes. Then, just as suddenly, it solidifies again. The figures frozen mid-gesture. The painter sighs. There. Immortal, yet unfinished. That's the joke. He looks down at his hands, flexing them. I thought creation was escape, he says softly. But even art decays into confession. The red light drains from his form. He begins to fade back into the plaster. When the color dries, he whispers, tell them to stop looking. The walls remember too well. The voice dwindles into silence. Only the brush remains on the stool, its bristles now pale, clean, as if rinsed by unseen water. You step backward toward the doorway, careful not to touch the frescoes. The angel's eyes have closed again, but a faint smile lingers on its lips, ambiguous, almost approving. The smell of linseed and iron dissolves into cold air. As you turn to leave, the drip of water resumes from somewhere high above, a steady rhythm leading downward through cracks in the floor toward deeper chambers. The paint glistens once more before dulling to normal color, sealing its witness behind varnish and time. The corridor beyond feels different, cooler, dimmer, yet lighter somehow, as though the castle has exhaled another century of regret. From the far side, a low barking echoes through the fog. Hounds, not human, restless and hungry. The next story has already woken. The barking grows sharper as you follow the outer passage downward, echoing between the buttresses like drumbeats of bone. At first it sounds ordinary, dogs baying at some invisible moon. But the closer you come, the less it resembles anything alive. The rhythm is too even, too rehearsed, like soldiers in perfect formation. You reach the lower courtyard where the air smells of wet earth and salt blown in from the sea. Moonlight filters through the open gate, spilling across the cobblestones in long silver stripes. The noise comes from beyond that gate, where a slope leads down into the fog-choked woods. You hesitate. The stories of the huntsman's hounds are not friendly ones. They say he still rides every winter solstice, chasing souls rather than stags, his dogs half shadow, half fire. But this isn't solstice, it's just another restless night in a castle that refuses to sleep. You step outside. The fog thickens, muffling every sound except the distant thunder of paws. Somewhere ahead, a horn blows, a single mournful note that vibrates in your ribs. The forest opens before you, branches arching overhead like ribs of an ancient beast. Dew drips from every leaf, yet the ground beneath is bone dry. You walk a few yards before you see them, shapes gliding through the mist, low and fast, leaving streaks of faint blue fire in their wake. Ghostly hounds, translucent but heavy enough to kick up dust as they run. Their eyes glow white, their mouths emit no breath, and each paw strikes sounds like the crack of a whip. They circle something in the clearing, a figure on horseback, motionless except for the slow rise and fall of the animal beneath him. The huntsman sits tall, cloaked in dark leather, his face hidden by a hood. The horse's mane ripples like smoke, its hooves leaving no prints. He raises one gloved hand and the hounds freeze mid-step. The sudden silence is more violent than the noise before it. Then he speaks, his voice deep and measured, carrying the authority of storms. "You've come uncalled," he says. "Few do and return." You manage to answer, barely asking what it is he hunts. "Remorse," he replies simply. The scent never fades. He dismounts in one seamless motion, his boots striking the earth without sound. The hounds part to make way for him, watching with eyes that gleam like polished bone. Each soul leaves a trail, he continues, some thicker than others. This place, he gestures toward the castle looming behind you, is my kennel. A documented fact exists, faint but real. A 15th century sheriff of Dover vanished while pursuing smugglers near these cliffs. Witnesses later claimed to hear his hunting horn for years afterward, even during calm seas. Some say he made a pact to continue his chase forever. Others insist he simply fell, and the legend filled the silence. The huntsman steps closer now, his outline flickering between armor and shadow. "They called me loyal," he says with a grim chuckle. "Loyalty's just obedience that's lost its master." He lifts his hand again and one of the hounds trots forward, larger than a wolf, its body made of gray light. It stops at your feet, sniffing. You feel cold radiate upward through your shoes, through your bones, into your teeth. The hound's tongue flicks out, touching the air just before your hand. It whines softly, almost mournful. "He remembers you," the huntsman says. "You passed through the bridge, didn't you? Broke their circle. The river carried him to me." Before you can react, the hound tilts its head, howling once low, long, impossibly sad. The other dogs join, a harmony that shivers the trees and bends the mist. The huntsman closes his eyes, listening. "They smell peace," he says at last. Unfamiliar, but welcome. Then he reaches into the fog and pulls free an old hunting horn, cracked but gleaming with a faint green sheen. "Take it," he says. "If ever the dead run wild again, sound this, and they'll remember their leash." You hesitate, but he presses it into your hands. The metal feels weightless, vibrating gently, warm like something alive. When you look up again, the huntsman has already mounted his horse. "Ride well, listener," he says, voice fading with distance. "Not all ghosts are meant to be chased." The hounds leap after him, streaks of blue vanishing between the trees. The fog folds back into silence, leaving only the faint scent of ozone and pine. You stare at the horn. It glows once, briefly, before dulling to the color of tarnished brass. Somewhere far above, the castle windows flash like eyes catching moonlight. You start back toward them, your footsteps louder than before. The forest no longer hums. It waits, and in your pocket the horn thrums quietly, as if keeping time with the castle's endless heartbeat. The night stretches thin as parchment when you reach the upper halls. The corridors tilt with age, and the air changes from damp to brittle cold, the kind that pinches skin and turns breath into frost ribbons. A staircase curls upward to a wide landing, lit only by the blue shimmer of moonlight filtering through stained glass. Beyond it, a grand door looms, carved from black oak and inlaid with silver leaf that still glints despite centuries of neglect. On its surface sits a crown motif, the metal dull with time, the inscription nearly worn away. Only 2 words remain legible: sed vacante. The seat is empty. This is the throne room of Edinburgh Keep, or what's left of it, known among travelers as the Cold Hall. Legends claim a royal spectre guards it, the last queen of the northern provinces, frozen in loyalty long after her blood cooled. She's said to appear when someone dares to touch her chair. You push the door open and a draft sweeps past. Not violent, just old, the breath of the building itself. The room beyond is vast and bare. The walls glimmer with frost that crawls like ivy. The ceiling arches vanish into shadow, and in the middle stands the throne. Stone, not gold, carved from a single slab of granite veined with white. It gleams like ice. You step closer. The closer you get, the quieter everything becomes, until even your heartbeat feels muffled, replaced by the distant echo of wind that isn't there. The throne's arms are shaped like wolves' heads, their eyes hollow, their teeth sharp. One might expect grandeur here, but it feels more like a tomb than a seat of power. There's something on the chair, a shape that wasn't visible at first glance. It's a thin figure draped in what might once have been regal robes but now hang like frost-bitten veils. Her skin is translucent, her hair white as hoarfrost, her eyes closed as if asleep. The Queen of Cold Thrones herself. Her lips part slightly, and a curl of mist escapes. When she speaks, it's not with her mouth but with the air around you, her voice echoing off stone like wind inside a bell. "They said I ruled without warmth," she murmurs. They were correct. Her eyelids lift, and beneath them shimmer pupils like shards of broken crystal. "Do you seek judgment or shelter?" You answer honestly that you aren't sure. She nods once, faintly amused. "Neither will keep you warm." Her story is a fragment scattered through monastic notes. Queen Aelith of Edinburgh, who in the year 1403 ordered her council to remain seated through a blizzard to prove endurance a virtue. None survived the night except her. The next morning she decreed that cold clarifies, turning the keep into a monument of austerity until her heart literally froze according to the chronicler during prayer. Historians doubt the freezing part, but the keep's temperature never rises above 5 degrees, even in midsummer, a fact that delights physicists and terrifies tourists. The queen gestures toward the throne. "Sit," she says, "and see." You hesitate, but curiosity pulls stronger than self-preservation. The stone bites through your clothes as soon as you touch it. The air thickens, the frost on the walls begins to move, swirling outward until the hall transforms. For an instant you're surrounded by courtiers, hundreds of them, their breath crystallizing mid-air as they bow to her. You feel their fear, a reverence mixed with exhaustion. The queen stands beside you, her hand resting lightly on your shoulder, colder than marble. They begged for mercy from the season. She says, I gave them truth instead. Warmth deceives. The vision flickers and breaks. You're alone again. She's back on the throne, watching you with faint satisfaction. Do you understand now? She asks. You manage to whisper yes, though you don't. Good, she says. Then leave while your blood still moves. She raises her hand. The door behind you creaks open as though pushed by invisible attendants. You stand, shivering, and turn to go. As you reach the threshold, she speaks once more. Tell the painter, she murmurs. His color has lasted, but he missed the hue of frost. When you step back into the corridor, the door closes behind you with a slow, final sigh. The cold lifts immediately, replaced by the usual damp breath of the castle. Your hands ache, but when you glance at your palms, they bear faint white marks in the shape of wolves' heads. Outside the stained glass window, dawn hides behind clouds. You could swear the frost inside the glass shifts slightly, forming her face for just a moment before melting into light. Somewhere far below, a faint clinking begins. Metal against stone. Rhythmic, deliberate. The librarian of lost names has begun sorting again, and your feet are already moving toward the sound. The sound you follow is not quite footsteps and not quite breathing. Something in between, a mechanical rhythm that grows clearer the deeper you descend. The stairwell here spirals tighter than any before it. The stone cool and slick, etched with faded inscriptions that no longer read like words but like the memory of them. The air smells of ink, long dried, of paper turned to dust, and the faint metallic tang of candle smoke that shouldn't exist anymore. You reach the bottom expecting another crypt, but the room you step into feels almost alive. Shelves rise all around, higher than the light can reach, each stacked with books that glimmer faintly under a sheen of frost. None have titles. They hum softly, the vibration pulsing in perfect rhythm with your heartbeat. At the room's center stands a desk the size of a coffin, and behind it sits the librarian. He looks like parchment given human form. Tall, thin, wrapped in robes the color of dust and moonlight. His face is obscured by a hood, but you can feel his gaze like a fingertip on your forehead. You're late, he says quietly, though you've never been invited. His voice has the calm cadence of a monk who's memorized eternity. The index waits for no one. You glance at the shelves and realize each spine bears a faint, shifting shimmer. Letters appearing and vanishing too fast to read. The librarian dips a quill into a bowl of black liquid that glows faint green under the lantern's light. Every name ever forgotten comes here, he says, as if reading your thoughts. Not erased, merely misplaced. You'd be surprised how often the living misfile their own. A fact buried in old parish records claims that when this castle still thrived, a scribe named Brother Evo maintained its archives. He vanished during the plague years, leaving behind sealed rooms full of blank scrolls and ink that refused to dry. Later restorers swore they could hear scratching behind the walls. Scholars dismissed it as rats or draft noises, but the folklore persisted, a ghostly clerk still recording the names of those the world had stopped remembering. Evo, you whisper, and the librarian's quill pauses midair. A poor word for what I became, he murmurs. I keep the ledger because someone must. He gestures toward a massive tome open on the desk. The pages shimmer faintly, each line filled with names written in the same hand but different styles, as though centuries of practice have all merged into one endless script. Some names are whole, he says, others only fragments. When the world forgets a person completely, their page turns blank again. He lifts the quill. But sometimes a visitor says one aloud. Then the ink returns. He looks at you, no eyes visible, yet somehow piercing. You've spoken many tonight. You realize he means the lady, the friar, the knight, the duchess, all the ones you've called by name. The air thickens as the shelves tremble slightly, the books humming louder. The librarian nods, satisfied. You've given them a night's reprieve. He dips the quill again, writing something slowly, the ink shining emerald. You lean forward, trying to read the line. It's your own name. That, he says, not unkindly, is the fee for remembrance. Every witness leaves a trace. You protest that you're alive, that your name isn't lost. He smiles, or maybe it's just the shadow shifting under his hood. For now, he says, but you've walked through centuries tonight. The castle doesn't distinguish between living and gone. It only keeps inventory. He turns the page. The next one is blank, waiting. A tremor runs through the room, dust raining from the shelves. The hum rises into a low chorus of whispered names, thousands overlapping, pleading, laughing, sighing. The librarian closes the ledger with a sound like thunder muffled by snow. They grow restless, he says. You've stirred the index too soon. He stands taller than he should be and gestures toward a narrow doorway behind the desk. Go. Up through the vault of air. The next keeper waits where the clock counts backward. You back away, the whispers swirling into a single voice that almost sounds grateful. When you step through the arch, the cold lifts abruptly, replaced by a faint ticking that echoes like rainfall. Behind you, the librarian resumes writing. The quill scratches once, twice, then stops. You hear him whisper one final line, soft, deliberate, and strangely kind. Every story needs its reader. The doorway seals, leaving you alone in another corridor. The ticking grows louder now, sharp and rhythmic, marking time not forward but in reverse. Somewhere above, a bell strikes 13, and you realize you're walking toward the gatehouse clock that counts backward, the next ghost in the endless catalogue of the forgotten. The corridor opens into the narrow spine of the gatehouse, where gears grind faintly above your head like a sleeping animal's jaw. Each step forward feels heavier, as if time itself thickens the air here. The ticking grows distinct, slow, deliberate, but wrong. Every beat drags upward instead of falling. You glance at the old iron clock mounted on the far wall, its face cracked and blackened by soot. The hands move counter to reason, spinning left, rewinding through hours that haven't happened yet. With every click, a fine dust of rust shakes free, glittering in the lantern light like sparks from a tired forge. You approach it carefully, and with each footstep, the rhythm of the ticking shifts to match your heartbeat. Steady, hesitant, then slightly out of sync until it becomes impossible to tell which sound belongs to you. The gatehouse clock has its own tale. Half miracle, half curse. Built in 1524 by a master craftsman named Arno Belden, it was designed to mark the kingdom's longevity, but the mechanism broke during its first day of operation. Witnesses claimed that after a lightning strike the gears reversed, and the clock began to tick backward. The Duke ordered it dismantled, yet every attempt failed. The tools shattered, the workmen grew ill, and one apprentice vanished entirely. Eventually, they sealed the gatehouse and declared it cursed. Centuries later, it began ticking again, always on the nights when someone inside the castle died. Historians dismiss it as romanticized superstition, but standing here, watching the hands trace midnight in reverse, you begin to suspect history has simply lacked witnesses brave or foolish enough to verify it. You climb the narrow staircase to the mechanism above. The air here smells of old oil and something sharper, ozone, maybe, or breath from another century. The gears are enormous, teeth glistening faintly green with corrosion, that same alchemist's hue threading through yet another piece of the castle. At their center, a pendulum swings, slow, defiant, moving left when it should move right. The sound it makes is less a tick than a sigh. You step closer and feel static prickle up your arms. The clock isn't merely running backward, it's pulling the air with it, a low inward tide that stirs your clothes and hair. Shadows lean toward the gears instead of away. Then you see the figure. A man hunched beside the mechanism, ghostly pale, wearing an apron dark with soot. His hands move automatically, tightening bolts that no longer exist, adjusting invisible gears. Too slow, he mutters. Too fast. Time must obey. His eyes flicker toward you but never focus, as though he's trapped mid-thought. He said to make it eternal, he murmurs. He didn't say which direction. He turns a key in the air, and for a heartbeat, the pendulum stops entirely. The silence that follows is total. No ticking, no breath, not even the faint wind outside. Your stomach knots. The absence of time feels like pressure on your bones. Then, with a sharp metallic click, the pendulum lurches again, backward, faster now. The ghost sighs, standing upright. I gave them years to spend again, he says. They wasted them exactly as before. You realize he's Arno Belden himself, the clockmaker damned to maintain his creation for eternity. Does it still work? You ask, though your voice sounds strange in the heavy air. He smiles faintly. Depends what you mean by work. He gestures toward the gears. Every hour I wind backward returns a memory someone wanted forgotten. This place, this entire fortress is made of them. You've felt it, haven't you? The repeating. He wipes his hands on his apron, though no soot remains. It's all time, looping around the wound. Behind him, the face of the clock groans. The minute hand jerks, slashing through the numbers like a scythe. Outside, the bell begins to ring. 13 times, each louder than the last. But instead of fading, the sound climbs, the echoes stacking until it feels like the tower is vibrating around you. The ghost shouts above the noise, when it stops, don't move. Time will notice you. The final peal crashes through the air, and then everything freezes. The bell's echo hangs solid in the air like a glass sphere. Dust motes stop mid-fall. Even your breath halts in your throat. For one impossible moment, you see the world inverted, light bending the wrong way, shadows pointing inward. Then, as quickly as it came, the sound collapses. The pendulum resumes. The ghost exhales, his form flickering. It's never satisfied, he says softly. Each time it stops, it takes a moment from whoever's watching. You've given it one now. He glances at you with faint pity. Soon you'll forget something small. A word, a face, a day, and you'll think it natural. But the clock will remember. He steps backward, dissolving into the machinery until only his voice remains. When you reach the gate, tell the cook the hour's finally ready. You back down the stairs, the ticking still chasing you. Faster now, eager. By the time you reach the corridor again, the rhythm has slowed to normal. Or maybe your heartbeat has matched it. The castle's usual hum returns, the sound of history breathing in its sleep. You exhale, shaky but relieved. The backward clock continues its impossible dance above, carving minutes out of memory, one silent theft at a time. And somewhere deeper inside the keep you catch a whiff of something new. Roast meat, spices, warmth. The cook's fire still burning after all this time, waiting for guests who can no longer taste. The next story is already simmering. The corridor beyond the gatehouse smells faintly of smoke, though no chimney is near. You follow it down a narrow spiral staircase, the air thickening with every step until it tastes faintly of burnt herbs and something sweeter like honey left too long over a fire. The steps open into a kitchen so vast it could hold an army and yet feels empty, as if the walls themselves had absorbed every sound ever made here. A hearth dominates one wall, far wider than any modern fireplace, its stone blackened and cracked, yet the flames burn brightly, greenish and flickering in the absence of wood or fuel. The cook's fire that never dies, locals call it, and you realize why. This is not a hearth, it is a relic, a breathing thing, fed by memory and perhaps something more sinister. Long ago, according to fragmented castle records, a head cook named Myrwin tended this kitchen under the command of the Duke. She was said to have been fiercely protective of her recipes, particularly a roast venison that the Duke considered priceless. When the castle fell during a minor siege in 1389, Marwyn refused to leave the kitchen even as the walls burned around her. Accounts vary. Some say she perished in the fire, others that she simply vanished. Every century thereafter, witnesses claim to smell her signature dishes, hear the chopping of knives, and see the flames burning green from the old hearth. Scholars debate whether the fire is an alchemical artifact, a residual haunting, or a combination of both. But standing here, you know it feels very real. Hot on your skin, though no heat radiates outward. You step closer to the hearth. The flames lick the blackened stone like emerald tongues, casting shadows that twist and bend as if they have consciousness. A copper cauldron hangs above, suspended without chain or hook, steaming a broth that smells faintly of cinnamon and old bread. You glance at the shelves, pots, pans, and utensils lined with meticulous care, untouched by centuries. The ghost of Marwyn, you sense, still organizes everything in perfect order. Her presence is subtle but undeniable. A draft carries whispers of instructions and reprimands, ghostly orders to stir clockwise and season to taste, all with a voice that is kind yet firm. You touch the lip of the hearth. The flames flicker against your fingers like they recognize you as another visitor, an unwitting participant in her eternal service. From the corner of the kitchen, the temperature dips slightly, and the scent shifts to something faintly metallic. The smell of blood mixed with salt. You hesitate, but the cauldron bubbles softly, almost coaxing you closer. Then a hand, translucent and faintly green, appears, stirring the broth. Marwyn herself manifests, robes singed at the edges, her face shadowed beneath a hairnet woven from the castle's history. "Do not fear," she murmurs, "the fire burns only for those who remember." Her movements are meticulous, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Every swirl of the spoon sends tiny sparks of green flame upward, floating like embers suspended in still air. You watch, entranced, as she tastes the broth, nods and adjusts seasonings that cannot exist in this world. The alchemy of her fire becomes clearer as you observe. It feeds not on fuel, but on the memory of meals prepared and consumed in this kitchen over centuries. Every chop, every simmer, every bite leaves an echo in the hearth, sustaining the flame. You see shadows of former cooks, long dead, assisting her in ghostly synchronization, their spectral knives slicing ingredients that vanish before hitting the cauldron. "This is not punishment," she says, "nor penance. This is continuity. The taste must never be forgotten." A faint hum arises from the kitchen floorboards, a vibration of memory transferred through stone, so persistent it resonates with your own heartbeat. The smell of roasted venison intensifies, making your mouth water despite yourself. You catch a glimpse of a table set as though awaiting diners, plates polished, goblets filled, and knives aligned with exacting precision. Across the room, shadows flicker, spectral servants carrying trays, offering meals that your hands can see but not touch. She turns to you briefly, her eyes reflecting the green fire. "You may leave," she says softly, "but remember what feeds you." The cauldron bubbles higher, and with each swell the green flames rise and curl into shapes, faces, hands, and fleeting smiles. You step back, letting the door close behind you. But the scent of spices lingers on your clothes, the memory of warmth embedding in your mind. The kitchen is still alive behind the walls, silent now except for the soft hiss of the fire, and the occasional clatter of utensils that aren't there. Somewhere in the castle above, the distant echo of a bell chimes. You realize it's not the supper bell, nor the piper's tune, but a reminder that one story ends only when another begins. Ahead, the stairwell leads toward the courtyard, but faintly you can hear the first whispers of the next haunting, the duel in the courtyard, and the ghosts already assembling, awaiting your arrival. The courtyard stretches before you, a broad expanse of cobblestones slick with dew, glimmering under a faint cold moon. The air carries a metallic tang, sharp as a knife's edge, and with every step you hear the soft echo of movement behind the stone walls, like breath trapped in ancient masonry. Shadows lengthen and shift, but there is no wind, only the quiet anticipation of something old and precise. At the far end, two figures stand across from one another in the ghostly glow, their silhouettes solid but trembling slightly, as though the air itself vibrates with the weight of their centuries-old feud. The duel in the courtyard has been recounted in fragmentary chronicles, a dispute between two knights over honor, land, or perhaps a misplaced jest. The records are vague, but the story insists they never finished the fight, and neither did the spirits who reenact it nightly. You step closer. Each footfall sends tiny ripples across the mist that clings to the stones like watercolors bleeding on old parchment. The knight's armor glints faintly, green and spectral, reflecting the moon in ways the living world cannot replicate. One raises a sword, long, thin, and impossibly sharp, though no blade exists. The other mirrors the movement with equal grace and force, their choreography precise, repeated endlessly through the years. You feel the tension, the pull of history pressing on your chest. Their duel is not chaotic but ritualistic, each strike, parry, and lunge a memorized pattern, a cycle of honor frozen in spectral time. You step back, realizing the air carries a low hum, faint but insistent, like the echo of every past observer's gasp and cheer rolled into one continuous note. The historical record mentions that during the late 14th century, the courtyard witnessed a series of duels settled by trial by skill, in which no one kept track of the victor when disputes became too complicated or bloody. Chroniclers suggest that during one such duel, both combatants vanished under mysterious circumstances, leaving only their swords clanging against empty air. Scholars debate whether the duel was real, a metaphor for political strife, or an elaborate morality tale. As you watch, you notice that the spectral knight's movements hint at frustration, the tension of unfinished business preserved across generations. The echo of each strike resonates in the walls, vibrating your bones and reminding you that the castle itself is both arena and audience. A sudden shift occurs. The air thickens, fog curling around the knight's feet, obscuring the ground. Sparks of green light flare from the point of contact between their swords, illuminating the arc of a blade in perfect slow motion. The duel is simultaneous with centuries of memory, every strike linked to every previous attempt, layered atop itself like a palimpsest of combat. You can almost see echoes of the knight's previous attempts hovering behind them, translucent outlines overlapping the current struggle. One figure falters, hesitates, and a tiny flicker of shadow escapes his armor, the residue of a forgotten life. You realize these are not mere illusions but fragments of soul, trapped in the choreography of conflict. From somewhere in the corner of the courtyard a faint whistle rises, a signal from the piper, perhaps, or the breath of some other ghost who watches from above. The knights adjust mid-air, raising shields that ripple like liquid metal. Every movement is synchronized, deliberate yet infused with tension, like a performance repeated ad infinitum. You sense the weight of centuries pressing in, the courtyard no longer stone and mortar but a liminal space where time has folded back on itself. Your pulse sinks to the rhythm of the strikes, each swing resonating through your chest. You can feel the story unfolding not in moments but in layers of memory, each echo of the sword carrying the hope, anger, and skill of men long gone. You step closer, drawn by curiosity, and the mist parts to reveal the swords in exquisite detail inscribed with runes, faintly glowing green like remnants of alchemy. You realize the duel is more than physical, it's symbolic, a binding of honor and memory, a loop that cannot resolve until someone interrupts it. The knight's eyes, pale and fixed, lock onto one another. The moment stretches, frozen, as though they anticipate your intervention. You hold your breath, knowing that the castle's echoes carry far beyond the courtyard. Each swing is a question, each parry an answer. You sense that if you leave, the cycle will resume, unchanged, and the duel will repeat endlessly. Then, without warning, the entire courtyard shivers, a vibration that lifts dust from the stones and makes the air hum louder. The knights swing once, a final movement you cannot yet interpret. The point of contact bursts into a green flare, bright enough to silhouette every turret and arrow slit. The echoes of all previous duels rise, layered into a singular chorus of metal on metal, until the sound collapses into silence. The fog dissolves slightly, revealing only the faint shimmer of the combatants, still standing, still poised. You step back, your body tense, realizing that even though the physical clash has paused, the duel exists beyond resolution. It's not a battle that ends, it is a story that endures. As you leave the courtyard, the echo of clashing steel fades into the ambient hum of the castle. The walls sigh with relief. The moonlight glints once more off the cold stones, and you sense the rhythm of the duel continuing beneath the surface, ready to resume whenever the castle wills it. The next story waits, already stirring in the shadows, the widow's lantern at Chateau Noir, and the grieving spirit who will light it once more. The corridors narrow after the courtyard, and the air carries the faint scent of smoke mixed with damp stone. Your footsteps echo softly, but they are not alone. Another sound drifts from ahead, rhythmic and deliberate like the beat of someone tapping on metal or a distant heartbeat. The light from your lantern stretches long shadows across the walls, making the ancient tapestries sway even though there is no breeze. You round a corner, and the corridor opens into a smaller, arched passage that slopes downward, cold and silent except for the faint creak of a floorboard that isn't yours. At the far end, a narrow window catches a shaft of moonlight, revealing a pale figure holding a lantern. The glow is faint, amber and trembling, yet it illuminates the air like fireflies trapped in glass. This is the widow's lantern, a story older than the castle itself. She was said to be Lady Eloise, whose husband perished in battle while defending the southern walls during the Wars of the Roses. According to the local chronicle, she spent the following decades wandering the chateau at night, carrying a lantern to guide her husband's spirit back to the hall where he once dined. Historical evidence is sparse. One letter mentions a widow keeping nightly vigils for her deceased lord, though the manuscript is smudged and possibly forged by monks seeking patronage. Still, the tale persists, repeated by watchmen and chroniclers alike. A solitary woman in black wandering the halls, her lantern never extinguished. Skeptics argue that the story is merely a poetic interpretation of practical nighttime light, while enthusiasts insist the flame is kept alive by grief and memory. Standing here, you are inclined to believe the latter. The widow herself turns, her face obscured by a delicate black veil, and you feel the weight of her gaze like a cool breeze brushing your spine. Her lantern swings gently, though no wind disturbs it. She lifts it slightly, the glass catching the moonlight, and shadows dance across the walls of the narrow hallway. She moves closer, steps silent on stone, each one precise, like someone who has walked these halls for centuries without tiring. The flame flickers as if responding to her thoughts. You sense more than see the sorrow that drives her, a grief that stretches beyond mortality. Every corner she passes seems to hold its breath. You follow instinctively, drawn toward the main hall at the end of the passage. Along the walls, faint scratches appear, small symbols etched into the stone with a hand that must no longer exist. They glow slightly as you approach, forming a pattern you can't quite read, but it feels like a map of loss, a record of devotion written in light. The widow stops beneath a massive archway, raising the lantern higher so its glow sweeps across a tapestry depicting the chateau's gardens. The plants sway even though the windows are closed, bending toward the lantern as though bowing to her presence. You can see faint figures among the greenery, shadows of servants, children, and guests who have long since vanished, all frozen in perpetual service to the halls and the widow's devotion. Historical accounts indicate that Lady Eloise's nightly vigils were interrupted only once, during a storm so violent that a servant claimed to see her lantern carried off by a gust of wind. When the storm cleared, the lantern appeared again, floating in the same window where she had always stood. Scholars debate whether she existed at all, or whether the entire story is a metaphor for grief and the human need to seek closure. Yet, standing here, watching the faint glow of the flame and the way the shadows shift, the debate feels irrelevant. The widow exists in the rhythm of the halls, in the air that hums with centuries of longing. She moves toward a small table set with plates and cups that have not been used in hundreds of years. The lantern hovers over the surface, casting its golden light across untouched silverware. You notice that the flame is oddly warm, though it does not radiate heat. When she pauses and looks directly at you, you feel the same weight you felt in the laboratory of the alchemist, the sensation that this place responds to intention, to presence. "Do you see them?" she whispers, "the ones who wait?" You nod, though you are unsure what you have truly witnessed. She gestures and the shadows of figures around the table shift slightly, bows bending, heads inclining. The hall seems alive, breathing in unison with the lantern's pulse. The widow continues along the hallway, leading you back toward the spiral stairwell that will take you to the upper chambers. With each step, the lantern swings, casting dancing light on the walls, revealing tiny hidden carvings of hearts, letters, and dates, memories of lovers long gone, captured by grief and devotion. The floor beneath your feet seems to resonate with every heartbeat, amplifying the sensation that the chateau itself participates in this ritual. As you follow, you realize that this is no longer just a story of loss but a lesson in memory, in devotion, in the persistence of those who cannot leave their places of love and sorrow. When she reaches the top of the stairwell, she stops, the lantern held high. You feel the weight of centuries in her silence. She inclines her head toward you and slowly fades into the light, leaving the lantern suspended in midair for a moment before it gently drifts toward the center of the hall. You are left alone, the air warm with faint echoes of footsteps, laughter, and whispered names. The hallway seems quieter, but the presence lingers, an invisible testament to patience and grief. The corridor now guides you forward, toward the whispering wall of Bran Castle, and you realize the next chapter of this night's journey is already stirring, waiting to unfold in shadows and light. The hallway from Chateau Noir leads you to a narrow stone passage lined with tapestries that shiver as though alive, though no wind stirs. The floor dips slightly, sloping toward the northern courtyard where moonlight glances off blackened stone. You can hear it before you see it, a low, continuous murmur, voices rising and falling in a cadence that is almost musical, though no one is present. As you approach, the murmur grows clearer, the words distinct but fragmented. "Wait, remember, follow," they say, overlapping like echoes trapped between layers of time. The whispering wall of Bran Castle is famed for this phenomenon, a stretch of stone so old and dense that it seems to absorb sound and regurgitate memory. Every night, travelers claim the wall repeats voices from centuries past, voices that insist on being heard. You reach the base of the wall, its stones cold to the touch, and run your hand along the jagged surface. The murmurs intensify, forming distinct phrases that seem to respond to your presence. They speak of battles, of feasts, of arguments over property and honor long forgotten by the living. You feel as though the wall is reading your thoughts, sifting through memory and curiosity alike, sorting the present from echoes of the past. It is said that the wall contains the voices of those who died within sight of Bran's ramparts, their last words caught and preserved, looped endlessly in the stone. Some historians call it legend. Geologists argue it is simply wind moving through porous rock. Neither explanation accounts for the clarity of the whispers that reach your ear now. You step closer, your hand pressed flat against the cold masonry. The voices begin to coalesce, forming a faint pattern in the stones, lines of script, symbols that resemble letters, but the language is indecipherable. One phrase resolves into something you recognize. Pacta servanda sunt. Agreements must be kept. The murmur becomes insistent, repeating the phrase over and over. You realize the wall is not merely speaking, it is reminding, admonishing. The whispers form spectral shapes, faces of long-dead courtiers, soldiers and servants peering through the cracks, translucent and pale, their eyes demanding attention. The wall is alive with their will, each stone a silent witness, now given voice. According to records from the 15th century, Bran Castle hosted numerous secret councils where feuds were settled and pacts forged. One of these disputes ended in tragedy. A noblewoman was imprisoned within a tower wing, and 2 guards were executed for failing to deliver a message that could have prevented her death. The murmurings of these voices are said to be concentrated along this wall, a permanent reminder of broken communication and unfinished business. Scholars debate whether these are residual hauntings, early acoustic phenomena, or simply legend inflated over centuries. The closer you get, the more real it feels, each whispered syllable a tactile weight pressing against your chest. A shadow detaches itself from the stone and steps forward. A woman in a hooded cloak, her form partially transparent, glowing faintly in the cold light. Her lips move silently, yet you hear her clearly. "They must be heard," she says. The whispers swell around you, forming a chorus, voices layering atop one another. It is disorienting, intoxicating even. You can almost feel centuries pressing against your skin. She reaches toward the wall, fingers brushing the rough surface. They cannot rest until their words are passed on. She continues. Her hand hovers over a section of stone, and a small fissure opens slightly, releasing a pulse of cold air. Within that crack, the voices amplify, each word distinct now. Commands, pleas, cries of warning, sighs of regret. You lean closer, trying to make sense of it, when one particular voice rises above the others, a deep resonant tone, commanding yet sorrowful. It is the voice of a knight who died defending the southern gate, and his words form a clear warning. Do not forget the promises of those before you. The other whispers follow, supporting him in a subtle chorus. It is as if the wall has assembled a council from the echoes of its residents, each syllable reinforcing the next. You feel their weight, their persistence, their insistence that you remember. The woman steps back, her figure shimmering, fading slightly as though she has no right to remain long in the presence of living eyes. They are patient, she says, but endless patience does not forgive inattention. The murmur diminishes, leaving only the residual hum, the low vibration of voices content. For now that someone listens, you step away from the wall, your fingers leaving the cold surface, yet the hum lingers, resonating within your bones. You glance back, the fissure has closed, the stones are smooth again, but you know the voices remain, patient, eternal. As you leave the courtyard and ascend the stairs toward the keep's upper halls, the whispers fade into memory. Yet the lesson remains. The castle remembers, and the voices of the forgotten insist on being acknowledged. Ahead, the corridor twists, leading toward the final chamber where the keeper of the castle awaits. The last story of tonight, a convergence of echoes, memory, and history that has been guiding you all along. The air thickens once more, carrying the scent of aged parchment, cold stone, and a faint trace of green flame from an earlier alchemy, signaling that the final tale is near, and the castle is ready to reveal its ultimate secret. The final corridor stretches endlessly, or perhaps it only feels that way. The walls are blackened stone, slick with condensation and faintly humming, carrying the memories of every story you've walked through tonight. Shadows twist unnaturally along the archways, stretching and shrinking as though alive, yet no wind stirs. At the end a massive door looms, iron-bound and studded with tarnished silver, It hums softly, a vibration you feel in your chest before you hear it, with your ears. You reach out to the handle, and the air grows colder still, brushing over your skin like invisible fingertips. Beyond this door waits the keeper of the castle, the being who has overseen every haunting, every flicker of green flame, every echo that has followed you from hall to hall. The keeper is neither fully alive nor dead, a convergence of all who have remained bound to these walls, yet somehow separate from each. When the door swings open, it is as though you enter a vast chamber that is both empty and crowded, bright and shadowed, warm and freezing at once. The floor is polished stone, yet uneven, reflecting every faint light in patterns that seem familiar yet constantly shifting. In the center sits a figure on a throne of twisted iron and old oak, draped in robes woven from shadow and light. The hood obscures the face entirely, but you feel the presence immediately, patient, watchful, omniscient. The air vibrates faintly, carrying the residue of centuries of footsteps, laughter, whispers, and sorrow. "You've come far," the keeper says, voice deep and resonant, echoing off the walls in tones that vibrate your bones. Few reach this point and remain sane. The words are gentle, almost amused, yet heavy with gravity. You step closer, drawn forward by a curiosity that has not faltered all night. Around the chamber, faint glimmers float, the lady with the lantern, the singing knight, the headless friar, the piper, the queen's mirror, the duelists, the painter, the huntsman. Each of them flickers in and out, lingering in the peripheral shadows, silent witnesses to your arrival. The keeper raises a hand, and all figures bow slightly, not in deference to you, but in recognition of their own roles within the eternal cycle of the castle. The keeper continues, "All who have wandered these halls tonight have done so under my watch. Every whisper, every flame, every echo, I preserve it. The robes shift slightly as though alive, and the figure gestures to the room, the walls themselves vibrating with meaning. You have seen fragments of memory, ghosts bound by grief, curiosity, or unfinished duty. They are not malicious, they are persistent. They repeat, because they must. And now you carry their stories with you. You glance around, realizing the truth of this. Every step you have taken, every name spoken, every whispered voice is woven into the air itself, your presence acknowledged by the castle's consciousness. The keeper leans forward, and though the face remains hidden, you feel eyes fixed upon you, seeing every thought, every fear, every fascination you have had tonight. "Do you understand?" it asks softly. "All of this exists because someone remembered. Memory sustains the unseen. Without attention, these stories fade into nothingness. And yet, the keeper pauses, the chamber holding its breath. Even I cannot recall the future. Only the past is mine to hold." The robes ripple as though stirred by unseen wind, revealing glimpses of hallways you walked tonight. The East Tower, the cold throne, the whispering wall. Each blink of the figure's hand brings forth a fragment, a living memory replayed in miniature across the stone. A faint hum begins to fill the room, low and steady, almost musical. You realize it is the culmination of every sound you have followed. The piper's note, the ticking of the backward clock, the murmurings of the librarian, the laughter of the jester, the whispers of the wall. They blend into a single tone, rising and falling in perfect harmony with the keeper's voice. "The castle is alive," it says simply. "It exists because of attention, and you have paid it." The figures around you shimmer faintly in response, bowing, pausing, acknowledging the order restored by your witness. You step closer, and the keeper extends a hand, not to touch, but to gesture toward the throne. "Sit, if you wish. See what it means to hold centuries in your presence. Feel their patience, their sorrow, their hope. Know that this night, these halls, you are part of the continuum." You hesitate, the weight of time pressing on you. To sit is to claim awareness of everything, to carry the echo of all that has occurred and will recur. You lift a foot, and the chamber responds subtly. The green glow in the distant corners intensifies, the walls humming in resonance, reminding you that even your smallest movement matters. Hours pass in a breathless stretch of sensation, yet time is meaningless here. The keeper remains patient and silent, a living conduit for memory. The figures flicker gently, returning to their places in the stories you have already encountered. The candlelight glows soft and warm. The green flames pulsate gently. The whispers of the walls fade into a comfortable murmur. The castle exhales as if satisfied, and you feel an odd serenity descend, a sense that everything has finally found a rhythm. Your own breathing matches the pulse of the stone, your heartbeat in tune with echoes spanning centuries. The keeper's voice lowers, almost a whisper. When you leave, carry them lightly. Remember, but do not burden. Their stories are eternal. Your life is yours. The figure rises slowly, folding into the shadow of the throne, leaving only the faintest glow behind. The chamber becomes still, the echoes quiet. Outside, the corridors await, moonlight spilling across the stones, guiding you back toward the world above. The castle holds its breath one last time, then releases it in a sigh of stone and air. You turn to the doorway, stepping forward into the hall, the weight of centuries pressing lightly on your shoulders, your path illuminated by memory, until at last you reach the exit, leaving the keeper and the castle behind. Sweet dreams.